Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step softly into the hidden world of 19th century brothels where gaslight trembles in wet streets, carriage wheels hiss through mud, and a painted doorway can mean warmth, danger wages, shame, shelter, or all of them at once. You stand at the edge of a city that never really sleeps, breathing in coal smoke, horse sweat, spilled beer, cheap perfume, and the river's damp little contribution, which frankly nobody asked for. You probably won't survive this with your illusions intact, but you may come away understanding the past a little more gently. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you are watching from and what your local time is. Now dim the lights, and imagine that you are walking down a narrow street in the 1800s somewhere in London, Paris, New York, Melbourne, New Orleans, or another busy city where the century is growing louder by the year. The pavement is uneven beneath your boots. Rain gathers in shallow black puddles. Above you, windows glow yellow, behind curtains, and every sound seems softened by fog. A laugh from a tavern, a cough from a doorway, a distant bell, the slow clop of a horse pulling a cab through muck. You are not entering a world set apart from ordinary life. That's the first thing to understand. The brothel is not floating in some separate sinful universe, despite what respectable newspapers enjoy suggesting, while pretending not to enjoy suggesting it. It is woven into the city. It stands near the markets, theatres, docks, railway stations, army barracks, factories and lodging houses. It lives where people arrive, tired, hungry, lonely, underpaid, overworked, curious, desperate, or drunk enough to think every decision is suddenly poetry. In the 19th century, cities swell fast. Industrialization pulls people from villages into crowded streets. Young women arrive for domestic service, sewing work factory shifts, laundry selling favors, serving ale, or simply looking for any paid work that does not grind them completely flat. Wages are often low, work is unstable, and one missed payment can turn a room into a locked door. This is a mainstream historical fact, and not a cheerful one in many cities. Prostitution was tied closely to poverty, migration, and limited employment options for women. It was not always a single permanent identity. For some, it was occasional work. For others, it became the centre of survival. For still others, it was forced by deception, debt, or violence. As you continue, you pass a shop with shutters half closed. A woman leans nearby, wrapped in a shawl, watching the street with the calm alertness of someone who has learned to read footsteps. She notices your coat, your pace, the way you look away too quickly. The city is a book, and she has been studying it longer than you have. A little farther on, music spills out of a tavern. Inside, men crowd around tables, their collars damp, their voices thick with gin and argument. Upstairs, perhaps there are rooms for rent by the hour or evening. Not every brothel announces itself with red curtains and scandalous laughter. Many are disguised as lodging houses, taverns, coffee rooms, dress shops, or private homes. Respectability in the 19th century is often just a curtain with good timing. You might imagine these places as purely chaotic, but many had rhythms. Lamps were trimmed, sheets were changed at least in better houses. Fires were fed, drinks were poured, doors were watched, money was counted, visitors were judged. Women prepared themselves with powders, ribbons, combs, borrowed dresses, patched stockings, and little touches meant to make exhaustion look like invitation. The hidden world is not hidden because nobody knows about it. It is hidden because society prefers a theatrical kind of blindness. Everyone knows where certain streets are. Everyone knows which houses glow late. Everyone knows which men are going there. Then everyone agrees very nobly to blame the women. A policeman passes at the corner. He may ignore the house tonight. He may accept a payment. He may raid it next week. He may know the madam by name. The law is not simple here. In some places, prostitution itself is tolerated, while brothel-keeping solicitation or disorderly conduct is punished. In others, Regulation is built around medical inspection and registration, especially near military populations. The result is a world of uncertainty where legality shifts depending on class, neighbourhood, city-country mood, and whether someone important has been embarrassed recently. Historians still argue whether 19th century prostitution should be understood mainly as exploitation labour, survival strategy, social rebellion, or some uncomfortable mixture of all these things. The answer changes depending on whose story you follow. A young servant dismissed after pregnancy does not live the same story as a fashionable courtesan with wealthy patrons. A woman in a cramped dockside room does not share the same risks as one in a velvet drawing room near an opera house. Yet they are all gathered under one label by outsiders who prefer tidy categories because giddy categories are so much easier than compassion. You turn into a narrower lane and the city closes around you. The buildings lean inward like tired listeners. Somewhere overhead a baby cries. Somewhere below a drunk man sings one line of a song over and over because apparently the rest of the song has escaped for its own safety. The smell changes here. Less rain, more damp, brick, stale smoke, cabbage, water, perfume, and something medicinal. A door opens briefly, revealing lamplight wallpaper, a flash of red fabric, and a woman's face looking past you into the street. Then the door closes and the lane is dim again. There are odd details in this world, small and strange enough to survive in police reports, memoirs, and reform literature. One quirky tidbit, depending on the city, is that some brothels use coded signs, lamps, flower pots, curtains, or even arrangements of shutters to suggest availability without shouting it aloud. The exact meanings could change by neighbourhood, which makes the whole thing sound like a very tired spy network run on candles and gossip. A certain colour blind, a bright lamp left burning a woman seated at a particular window, all could speak to those who knew how to listen. But you should be careful. Much of what survives was written by outsiders, journalists, doctors, police, moral reformers, curious gentlemen and scandal collectors. Their accounts can be vivid, but also exaggerated, judgmental, fascinated, and sometimes wildly theatrical. They love to describe decline. They love to warn innocent readers while feeding them every delicious detail. So as you walk through this story, you keep one hand on the banister of doubt. Not everything printed in a Victorian pamphlet was true shocking, as that may be to all fans of dramatic pamphlets. Still, the broader world is real enough. You can feel it in the damp wool at your wrists. You can hear it in the coins changing hands. You can see it in the hard arithmetic of the city. A woman may choose between hunger and risk. A man may call himself respectable in daylight and knock here after dark. A reformer may condemn the house while depending on servants paid too little to survive safely. The brothel becomes a mirror, not a separate-off monster. It reflects wages, gender rules, double standards, migration, loneliness, appetite, and the great 19th century talent for pretending society's problems belong to someone else. You pause beneath a gas lamp. Its flame flickers behind dirty glass. Gaslighting changes city nights in the 1800s, making streets brighter, commerce longer, and surveillance easier, though not nearly as reassuring as officials like to claim. Light does not remove danger. It simply gives danger better shadows. Under that pale glow, faces past a soldier on leave, a clerk with ink still under his fingernails, a sailor smelling of tar and salt, a woman with a basket, a boy selling newspapers, a gentleman pretending very hard that he has lost his way. Of course he has. Terribly lost, almost heroically lost. Ahead the doorway waits. Not grand, not monstrous, just a doorway scratched by weather and touched by many hands. Behind it are rooms above taverns, parlours, behind curtains, staircases that creak, mirrors, clouded by smoke and lives more complicated than any single sermon or scandal sheet can hold. You step closer, not as a judge, not as a customer, not as a rescuer, with polished boots and loud opinions, but as a quiet visitor to the past. The street breathes around you. Somewhere inside a piano begins a slow tune, slightly out of tune, doing its best. You hear laughter, then silence, then a murmur of voices. The hidden world is opening now, one lamp at a time, and as you cross from the wet pavement toward the warmth of the house, you carry with you the fog, the noise, the uneasy knowledge that what happens inside has been made possible by everything outside. You step through the doorway, and the first thing that greets you is warmth. Not comfort exactly. Comfort is too generous a word for a place where every wall seems to know a secret and every stair complains beneath your foot. But after the wet street outside, after the fog and coal smoke pressing cold fingers under your collar, the heat from the hearth feels almost kind. It carries the smell of ash-spilled ale damp wool drying too near the fire, and a perfume so sweet it seems determined to win a battle against the entire building. The room below is a tavern, or perhaps it pretends to be one. A few men lean over their cups. One has fallen asleep with his cheek dangerously close to a puddle of beer, which is not the worst pillow in the 19th century, but still not ideal. Another argues softly with a woman in a green shawl, not angrily, just with the weary persistence of someone trying to spend less money than he has already promised. A fiddle scrapes somewhere near the back, cheerful in the way only bad music can be cheerful, as if enthusiasm alone might repair the notes. Above this public noise the house begins. You climb a narrow staircase. The banister is polished by many hands, not by servants with beeswax and pride, but by use. The wood is warm in some places, sticky in others. The stairs creak in a language of their own, warning every room that someone is coming. You pass wallpaper patterned with faded flowers, once bright, perhaps now browned by smoke. A lamp sits in a wall bracket, its glass chimney clouded. The flame gives off a trembling light that makes the hallway seem alive, breathing gently as you move. Many 19th century brothels, especially in crowded cities, were not grand mansions with velvet sofas and orchestras waiting in the parlour. A mainstream historical fact worth holding on to is that a large share of commercial sex took place in ordinary rented rooms, taverns, lodging houses, or small domestic interiors. These spaces could be cramped, improvised, and temporary. A house might be known to police one year and gone the next. A woman might work from a room she rented herself, or from a house controlled by a madam, or from the upstairs of a drinking place where the landlord understood exactly what kind of lodging paid best. You reach the landing. A door opens a crack and a face glances out, painted but tired. The eyes are quick. They measure you, dismiss you, then vanish. Behind another door, someone laughs too loudly and then coughs. In a third room, you hear water poured into a basin. The sound is intimate and ordinary, a small domestic splash in a house that strangers imagine only through scandal. That is one of the strange truths here. Brothels are workplaces, but they are also homes, temporary shelters, dressing rooms, sick rooms, kitchens, and waiting rooms for whatever comes next. You enter a parlour where the air is thick with smoke. There are chairs with horsehair stuffing, some worn into hollows. A small table holds glasses, a deck of cards, a cracked dish of nuts, and a vase with flowers that have surrendered several days ago but remain on duty. Curtains cover the windows. They may be heavy, not for elegance, but to hide the view inward and muffle the view outward. Privacy in these houses is often a patchwork made of cloth habit and the hope that neighbours are too busy with their own troubles. A woman sits near the fireplace sewing a ribbon back onto a bodice. Her needle flashes in the light. Another leans back with her shoes off, flexing sore toes and stockings darned at the heel. A third studies herself in a mirror speckled with age, pressing colour into her cheeks. You might expect constant drama, but much of the evening is waiting. Waiting for the next knock, waiting for the madam to call, waiting for a regular client, waiting for a drunk to leave, waiting for rent to be due, waiting for morning. Waiting really is one of the great invisible labours of the night. The rooms upstairs vary. In a poorer place, a chamber may hold only a narrow bed, a washstand, a chair and a hook for clothing. The sheets may be clean or not depending on the house, the hour, and the strength of anyone left to do laundry. In a better establishment, there might be patterned rugs, framed prints, mirrors, lamps, and a fire if the weather is cold. The difference matters. Class follows you even into the hidden parts of the city. Money changes the texture of danger. It does not remove it, but it may wrap it in softer fabric. One quirky tidbit from the period is that some houses kept guest books, joke ledgers, or coded account records that disguise clients under initials, nicknames, or absurd little titles. A banker might become Mr. Blue Gloves, a military officer. The colonel, whether or not he was truly a colonel, because apparently men have always enjoyed upgrading themselves in dim rooms. Such records could be practical, playful, or protective. They could also become dangerous if discovered during a raid or scandal. Paper remembers what people prefer to forget. A bell rings somewhere downstairs. The sound travels up the stairs like a small command. The women shift. One stands and smooths her skirt. Another adjusts a curl near her temple. The house has its own choreography. Doors open. Feet move, voices soften or brighten. A brothel may appear disorderly from outside, but inside it often depends on rules. Who greets, who waits, who serves drinks, who gets which room, who owes for clothing, who may refuse, who must pay the house, who may sit with clients, and who is expected to disappear if a better customer arrives. Historians still debate whether the typical brothel functioned more like a workplace, a household, or a site of confinement, and the answer depends heavily on the city, the class of the establishment, and the individual woman's circumstances. Some women had mobility and negotiated their earnings. Others were trapped in debt or controlled by threats. Some houses offered protection from street violence. Others produced violence of their own. The same staircase could lead to shelter for one woman and a locked life for another. You notice how thin the walls are. A whisper is not safe here. A sob may travel, so may a joker quarrel or the scrape of furniture. Privacy is performed rather than guaranteed. The women learn to live beside one another's secrets with a practical kind of mercy. They borrow pins, share rouge, fight over clients, warn each other about dangerous men, and know exactly who snores like a broken accordion. In such close quarters, tenderness and irritation must sleep in the same bed, metaphorically speaking, which is probably crowded enough already. Downstairs, the tavern keeps working. Drinks are sold because drinks loosen coins. Food may be served too, though calling some of it food requires generosity and perhaps poor lighting. A bowl of stew, a heel of bread, oysters in port cities, coffee in some houses, gin in many others. The smell rises through the floorboards, mixing with candle smoke and warm bodies. A customer who comes only for drink may be drawn upward. A customer who comes for company may be kept buying drink. The business is layered. Nothing in the house has just one purpose. You pass a small room where linens are piled in a basket. Laundry is everywhere in this world, even when nobody writes poems about it. Sheets, shifts, stockings, towels, petticoats, handkerchiefs, all must be washed, dried, repaired and replaced. The labour behind the labour remains half hidden. Someone carries water. Someone scrubs stains. Someone empties basins. Someone shakes ash from the grate. The brothel, for all its reputation as a place of pleasure, runs on chores. History often forgets the chores. It prefers scandal because scandal sells better than mending. A draft slips under a door and brushes your ankles. You hear rain begin again outside, ticking against the window panes. The house seems to gather itself against the weather. Women speak in low tones by the fire. A man laughs in the parlour below. The madam's voice cuts through gently but firmly, and at once the room changes shape around her. You have not properly met her yet, but you already feel her influence. She is in the accounts, the rules, the seating, the lamps, the warnings, the debts, the choice of who goes upstairs and who's turned away. For now you remain in the hallway listening to the building breathe. The rented rooms above the tavern hold more than transactions. They hold fatigue calculation, performance, hunger jokes, fear, and occasional flashes of real warmth. Outside the city calls this place immoral. Inside, people still have to keep the fire alive. find clean cloth, mend a torn hem, and decide whether the next knock sounds safe. The stairs creak again, someone is coming up. The footsteps on the stairs are slow, deliberate, and entirely too confident to belong to a nervous first-time visitor. You hear the faint rustle of skirts, the tap of a shoe, the soft clink of keys. Then she appears at the landing, not rushing, not smiling too much, not wasting any movement that does not earn its keep. This is the madam, or the keeper, or the landlady, depending on who is speaking and how respectable they want to sound while speaking of her. She carries herself like a woman who knows the price of candles, gin, broken mirrors, police attention, and foolish men. Especially foolish men. The 19th century produces them in admirable quantities. Her dress may be dark silk if the house is prosperous, or wool with a carefully preserved collar if it is not. Her hair is pinned firmly, her face is composed. She may have once worked in rooms like these herself, or she may have come from tavern-keeping, lodging houses, domestic service, or some other corner of the urban economy where women learn quickly that politeness is lovely, but rent prefers coins. You stand aside as she looks down the corridor. Nothing escapes her. The lamp that needs trimming, the girl who's been crying, the customer lingering too long near the parlour door, the glass left on the stairs because apparently gravity needed a challenge tonight. She notices all of it. In many brothels, the madame was the central manager of the household and business. That is a mainstream historical fact, though the exact power she held varied enormously. She might arrange rooms, collect payments, buy clothing, negotiate with landlords, pay bribes, handle police screen clients, supervise servants, and decide who stayed or left. Sometimes she is remembered as protective, sometimes as predatory. Often she is both, depending on who is remembering and whether money is owed. You follow her into the parlour where conversation settles into a lower pitch. Her presence changes the air. A young woman straightens in her chair. Another slips a coin quickly into her glove. The madam sees that too, of course, but says nothing yet. Silence is one of her tools. It sits in the room like a cat soft and ready to scratch. House rules matter here because chaos is expensive. No fighting in the front room, no stealing from clients unless the house runs on theft, in which case the rule becomes do not get caught, which is somehow both worse and more honest. No bringing in unauthorized visitors, no refusing certain regulars without permission in harsher houses, no drinking too much before midnight, no leaving without telling someone, no damaging furniture, no talking back when police are nearby, no trusting a man who says he will pay tomorrow, because tomorrow is a magical country where debts go to die. In better managed houses, rules can create a measure of safety. The madam may keep violent men out, or at least try. She may watch for disease, drunkenness, police traps, and clients who arrive with more temper than money. She may send a servant to listen at the corridor if a woman seems uneasy. She may insist that payment come first. She may make the difference between working indoors and standing alone in the cold street. But rules can also bind. They can turn shelter into dependence. Clothing bought through the house becomes debt. Food becomes debt. Medicine becomes debt. A room becomes debt. Even the ribbons that brighten a bodice may quietly grow teeth. One quirky tidbit from some 19th century urban records is that madams could be surprisingly skilled advertisers without ever printing a direct advertisement. They used networks of cab drivers, waiters, theatre ushers, hotel porters and hairdressers to guide clients toward the right door. A cabman might receive a small payment for bringing a gentleman from a railway station. A waiter might whisper an address after supper. It was referral marketing, but with more fog, more hats and fewer cheerful business pamphlets. The madam moves to a small desk near the wall. On it sits an account book, an inkstand, a bundle of receipts and perhaps a locked drawer. The accounts are the hidden skeleton of the house. Rent, coal, food, drink, laundry, medical fees, police fines, repairs, dresses, gloves, hairpins, rouge, payments owed to the landlord, payments owed by the women, payments owed by clients who have mysteriously become very forgetful. She knows who earned well last week, who is slipping behind, who is ill, who has a generous regular, and who is planning to leave if she can scrape together enough money. Historians still dispute whether madams should be viewed mostly as exploiters of vulnerable women or as female entrepreneurs navigating a market shaped by male demand and legal hypocrisy. The truth refuses to sit neatly. Some madams were brutal, some were pragmatic, some became wealthy enough to own property, lend money, or move in respectable circles at least until scandal dragged them back into print. Others lived precariously or was one raid, one angry landlord, or one unpaid debt from ruin. A woman could gain authority here, but it was authority built on unstable ground. You notice the younger women watching her. They study not only her orders but her survival. Madam knows how to speak differently to each visitor. To a nervous clerk she is warm and amused. To a drunk soldier sharp and commanding. To a policeman respectful but not submissive. To a wealthy man deferential, with just enough firmness to remind him that even his money has rules indoors. To the women she may be mother, jailer, creditor, employer, confidant, or all four before supper. The house needs supplies and supplies need negotiation. The madam deals with butchers, bakers, laundresses, dressmakers, coal merchants, pawnbrokers, physicians, and sometimes lawyers. She must keep the house visible enough to attract clients and hidden enough to avoid too much trouble. That balance is delicate. A noisy house draws complaints. A quiet house draws no money. Too respectable and men cannot find it. Too infamous and reformers begin sharpening their pencils, which is rarely good news for anyone. In some cities, brothels clustered in recognized districts tolerated as long as they remain contained. Officials often claimed this protected respectable women public order or military health. Very noble language naturally. But containment also made policing easier, bribery more predictable, and poor women more visible to punishment. The madam learns this geography. She knows which streets are watched, which magistrates are severe, which constables can be softened, and which neighbours complain only after being ignored socially. Human nature as always arrives wearing boots. A servant enters carrying a tray of glasses. She may be a maid, a younger relative, a former worker, or someone in training. In a brothel household, roles can blur. The woman who pours gin tonight may sit in the parlour next month. The woman entertaining clients may scrub floors on a slow morning. Respectable domestic service and sex work were not always separated by a wall as solid as moralists claimed. Many women move between kinds of labour as wages. Pregnancy, dismissal, illness, and luck pushed them around. The madam lifts one glass, inspects it, and sends it back with a look. No speech needed. Somewhere a clock ticks. The parlour settles again. You begin to understand that this house survives through constant judgment. Who is dangerous? Who is profitable? Who is lying? Who is desperate? Who can be trusted with a key? Who must not be left alone with the new girl? The madam's work is not gentle, but it is work. She manages risk as carefully as a shopkeeper manages stock, except her stock is not cloth or sugar, but the fragile safety, beauty, time and labour of women whose lives are already pressed hard by the city. Then a knock sounds below, once, twice, a pause. The madam turns her head. A young woman near the mirror freezes brush still in hand. The house listens. Every rule, every debt, every bargain, every little system of protection and control seems to gather around that sound. The madam closes the account book, slips the key into her pocket and moves toward the stairs. The knock below carries a different weight this time. Not loud, not timid, just steady, as if the person on the other side has already decided how the evening will go. The madam descends with measured steps, and you follow at a respectful distance, careful not to interrupt the rhythm of the house. When the door opens, a gust of damp night air slips inside, bringing with it the scent of rain and the city's restless breath. But the visitor is not who you expect. A young woman stands in the doorway, her shawl pulled tight, her shoes muddy from walking farther than she planned. Her eyes move quickly, taking in the room. The fire, the women, the arrangement of chairs, the expressions that greet her. She looks both hopeful and terrified, which is a combination the house recognizes immediately. This is not a client. This is someone arriving at the edge of a decision. The madam studies her in silence for a moment, weighing possibilities the way a shopkeeper weighs goods. You notice how the room stills. Even the man asleep at the table seems to lean into his dreams more quietly. The young woman shifts her weight, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Everything she owns may be inside that bundle. It is not a large life, but it is all she has. "Come in then," the madame says at last, her tone neither warm nor cold, just practical. The door closes and with it something changes. You step back as the newcomer moves into the lamplight. She is not dressed for this world yet. Her clothes are plain worn from travel or work. Her hair is pinned simply without the elaborate curls or ribbons you have already seen upstairs. Her hands betray her past. They are marked with small cuts and roughness, the quiet evidence of labour. Perhaps she worked in a factory, or as a servant dismissed without reference, or as a seamstress paid too little for too many hours. In the 19th century, it was painfully common for women to enter prostitution after losing employment, especially in domestic service, where dismissal could be sudden and unforgiving. The madam gestures toward the fire. "Warm yourself." The young woman hesitates, then steps closer, holding her hands out to the heat. You can almost feel the relief travel through her fingers, up her arms, into her shoulders. For a moment, she is simply someone cold, not yet someone labelled. The room allows that moment. It is brief, but it matters. Questions follow, though not all are spoken aloud. "Where are you from? Have you worked before? Are you alone? Do you owe anyone money? Are you being followed? Can you sew? Can you sing? Can you read? Do you understand what this house is?" The madam does not ask everything directly. She watches how the girl answers what is asked and how she avoids what is not. There is often a moment like this, a threshold where a life tilts. Some women arrive through persuasion, others through desperation, and some through deception. There are recorded cases of women being promised respectable work only to find themselves hear a practice that drew concern even in its own time. Campaigners spoke out against such recruitment methods, though their voices did not always reach the places where it mattered most. The young woman nods when the madam speaks quietly about the nature of the work. Whether she fully understands is another question. Understanding is not always immediate. Sometimes it arrives later in a room upstairs, in the sound of a door closing, in the realization that leaving will not be as simple as walking back out. A woman from the parlour brings a cup of tea. It is not elegant, but it is warm, and the newcomer accepts it with both hands. Small kindnesses exist here, though they are rarely free of calculation. Still, they are real in the moment they are given. The women in the room exchange glances. They have seen this before. They remember their own arrival, though memory may have softened or sharpened the edges over time. The madam begins to outline the terms. There will be a room, there will be clothing which must be paid for, there will be rules which must be followed. Earnings will be divided, food will be provided, debts will be recorded. It is a system, not chaos. That is both reassuring and unsettling. Systems can protect, but they can also trap. You notice how the young woman listens. She nods at the right moments, though her eyes flicker with uncertainty. She asks one question, then another, her voice quiet but steady. It is not foolishness that brings her here. It is a narrowing of choices. In many cities, women's wages in respectable trades were not enough to secure independent housing or stability. This economic pressure forms the background to countless individual stories, each one different, each one shaped by circumstance. The madam calls for another woman older with a calm manner. Show her upstairs. The two women climb the stairs together, and you follow us again, careful to remain unseen. The hallway seems different now, as if it is watching the newcomer. Doors that were simply doors before now feel like thresholds. The older woman speaks softly, explaining where things are kept, which rooms are used, how to signal for help if needed. There is a practicality in her tone, but also a trace of something gentler, perhaps memory, perhaps sympathy. They enter a small room. It holds a bed, a basin, a chair, and a narrow mirror. The window is covered by a curtain that blocks most of the street's view. The older woman sets down the bundle and begins to unpack it with permission. A dress folded carefully, a pair of stockings, a small book, perhaps a prayer book or a keepsake, a ribbon. These items are placed on the chair arranged with care, as if order might make the room feel safer. Then comes the transformation, though it is not immediate. The older woman opens a box containing cosmetics, hairpins, bits of fabric. She selects a comb and begins to work through the newcomer's hair, loosening it, reshaping it. Another woman appears in the doorway with a dress brighter than anything the newcomer owns. It is not new, but it is meant to catch the eye. The fabric is adjusted, pinned, altered to fit. Names are discussed. Not real names often. Names that sound softer, brighter, more memorable. A name that can be called from the stairs, whispered in the parlour, written in a ledger. The newcomer tries one, then another. Each feels strange on her tongue. Identity here is something you can change but not entirely escape. There are small rituals, a touch of colour to the cheeks, a ribbon tied just so, a lesson in how to sit, how to look, how to speak. It is performance but also protection. Appearance can influence how a client behaves, how the madam assigns rooms, how other women respond. It is not fair, but fairness is not a currency the house accepts. Debate continues among those who study this period about how much agency women had in shaping these identities. Some see creativity and self-fashioning, others see constraint and expectation. The truth likely shifts from one room to the next, from one woman to another. The newcomer stands before the mirror. For a moment she does not recognize herself. Then she tilts her head, adjusts a strand of hair, and tries to see what others will see. It is a quiet, private moment in a place that offers very little privacy. Downstairs the bell rings again. The house resumes its rhythm. The older woman places a hand briefly on the newcomer's shoulder. It is a simple gesture, but it carries weight. You sense that it is both welcome and warning. The newcomer takes a breath. The night is waiting. The newcomer remains before the mirror a moment longer, not admiring herself exactly, but learning the face that has been arranged for her. The candle flame trembles beside the glass, and its uneven light makes the rouge on her cheeks appear warmer than her skin truly is. The room smells of beeswax, damp fabric hair oil, and the faint mineral scent of washwater sitting in a chipped basin. Outside the window, rain strokes the glass with soft fingers. Inside, a different weather gathers around her. The older woman stands behind her, holding a comb in one hand and a pin between her lips. She studies the shape of the hair, then twists, lifts, secures. A curl is brought forward near the temple. A ribbon is adjusted. The dress is pulled smooth at the waist. Every detail matters, though not always in the way respectable society imagines. Paint and perfume are not merely signs of vanity, they are tools. Armour, advertisement disguise habit, and sometimes a small claim to self-command. In the 19th century, cosmetics carried complicated meanings. Respectable women might use powders and creams quietly, while loudly insisting that they did nothing of the sort, because apparently hypocrisy also needed a good complexion. Women associated with public sexuality were often accused of excessive paint, bright clothing, and artificial beauty. Yet many of the products they used were ordinary items in the broader world of fashion: rice powder, rouge-scented oils, pomades, coal-like darkeners, violet water, lavender, and cheap perfume sold in little bottles. The difference was not only the product, it was who was seen using it and under what light. You watch as the older woman opens a small tin of powder. It releases a dry, faintly floral smell. She pats it along the newcomer's forehead and throat, muting, shine softening, tiredness. Then comes rouge, touched lightly at first, then deepened. The young woman looks uncertain, as if each stroke is moving her farther from the person who entered with muddy shoes and a cloth bundle. But the woman behind her is gentle and efficient. Not too much, she says. Enough for the lamps. That phrase stays with you. Enough for the lamps. Beauty here is not made for daylight. It is shaped for gaslight, candlelight, hallway, shadows, tavern glow and the blurred vision of men who have been drinking since supper. Under such light edges soften, fatigue hides. A frayed cuff can be turned inward. A patched seam can disappear if the body moves carefully and the room is mercifully dim. It is stagecraft really, though the stage is a rented room and the audience may be dangerous. One well-established feature of urban nightlife in this period is that clothing operated as a code of class, occupation and availability. A hat, a ribbon, a bright shawl, a clean glove, or a deliberately striking dress could shape how a woman was read in the street or parlour. For women in brothels, garments might be owned, borrowed, rented, or purchased on credit through the house. That credit could become a chain. A silk bodice might help attract wealthier clients, but it could also deepen debt to the madam. The dress shines. The account book waits. A younger woman enters with a bottle and gives it a little shake. This one hides the smoke, she says, passing it over. The scent is sharp at first, then sweet. Orange flower, perhaps, or something trying very hard to impersonate orange flower after a difficult childhood in a chemist's back room. The newcomer sniffs and flinches. The others laugh softly, not cruelly. Perfume in the brothel does heavy labour. It covers stale rooms, unwashed streets, cheap tobacco, illness, fear-old drink, and the human truth that bodies are not porcelain figurines no matter how many poets pretend otherwise. Scent announces, conceals and lingers. A client may remember a woman by her perfume. A woman may remember a bad night by the same. There were some alarming ingredients in 19th century beauty culture. Lead-based face preparations had a long history, though awareness of their dangers grew over time. Belladonna drops were used by some to widen the pupils, creating a dark, dreamy look, which sounds romantic until you remember the plant is poisonous and eyesight is frankly useful. Not every woman used such things, and not every sensational claim should be swallowed whole, but the period's beauty trade included risks that make modern expired mascara seem very polite. The older woman now darkens the newcomer's lashes with a careful finger. The gesture is oddly intimate. Then she turns the young woman's chin toward the candle. "There, look alive." The phrase is practical, even brisk, yet it reveals something. Much of the performance is about vitality. The woman must appear awake when she is exhausted, amused when she's bored, warm when she's wary and desirable, when she feels the exact opposite of radiant. This is emotional labour before anyone gives it a tidy name. She must make the client feel seen, flattered, welcome, perhaps even chosen. Whether she feels any of those things herself is another matter, and often not the one being paid for. The question remains unsettled among researchers. Did these styles mainly mark women as trapped by public fantasy, or did they sometimes allow them to create identities with real power inside limited choices? You can see both possibilities in the mirror. The newcomer is being shaped by the expectations of men, madams, money, and the city, but she is also watching, learning, deciding what expression to wear and how much of herself to keep behind it. A woman by the fire downstairs wears scarlet ribbons and laughs with practiced brightness. Another prefers a quieter style, pale dress. Low voice here. Eyes lifted only now and then. A third has built an entire persona around witty remarks and a fan that snaps shut like a verdict. Each has learned that beauty is not one thing. It is mood timing, costume, sound, scent, posture, and the skill of knowing when to look away. You follow? As the newcomer is led down the corridor toward the parlour, the boards creak beneath her borrowed shoes. She moves carefully, not yet comfortable in the dress. At the top of the stairs she pauses. Below, the room glows amber. Men's voices rise and fall, glasses clink, someone coughs, someone calls for more ale. The ordinary noise of the house rolls upward like warm smoke. The madam looks up as the newcomer descends. She does not smile, but her eyes approve the work. The girl has been translated into the language of the room. That does not mean she belongs. Belonging is slower if it comes at all. But she can now be presented. In the parlour, a mirror hangs above the mantel. As she passes, you see her reflected again briefly among the lamps, the chairs, the other painted faces. She is one figure in a crowded composition, powder ribbons, flame, smoke and watchfulness. The transformation is not magic. It does not erase hunger, debt, fear or memory. It only gives them a costume. The client near the card table glances over. Another lifts his head. The madam makes the smallest gesture with her hand and the newcomer takes her place near the fire. Her fingers rest on the fabric of her skirt. She remembers to smile. The perfume settles around her like a veil. The newcomer sits near the fire, perfume settling around her, and the room adjusts to include her. Not kindly, not unkindly, just automatically, as if the house is a machine built from smoke, fabric, money, and glancer. The flames warm her knees through the borrowed skirt. Her hands rest carefully in her lap. She has been told not to fidget, so of course every nerve in her body now wishes to perform a full orchestra of fidgeting. History is cruel like that. Across the room, the first client studies her over the rim of his glass. He is a clerk, perhaps with ink under one fingernail and a collar that has gone soft from rain. He is not rich, but he has saved enough for an evening away from ledgers, cramped lodging, and a supervisor who probably believes kindness reduces efficiency. He looks tired and younger than he wants to appear. His boots are clean but worn. His hat sits on the table beside him, beaded with moisture from the fog. Clients came from many layers of urban society. Clerks, sailors, soldiers, apprentices, labourers, merchants, gentlemen, travellers, widowers, students and men simply far from home. In port cities and garrison towns, the flow could be especially steady, shaped by shipping, schedules, military paydays and the lonely mathematics of mobility. The brothel served male desire, certainly, but also male loneliness, entitlement, boredom, bravado, and the strange need to be comforted by someone whose own comfort nobody had bothered to arrange. The madam watches from near the door. Her gaze moves between the client and the newcomer, assessing whether this match is safe, profitable, or foolish. Sometimes those categories overlap in inconvenient ways. The clerk clears his throat. The newcomer smiles as she has been taught soft enough to invite not so much that she appears desperate. Performance begins before anyone speaks. He asks her name. She gives the new one. There it is, released into the room for the first time. It sounds strange, like a dress still pinned too tightly. The clerk repeats it with a little flourish as if he has discovered poetry. He has not, but let him have his moment. She lowers her eyes, then looks back at him. Someone nearby laughs at a card game. A glass clinks. Rain taps softly at the window. Not all clients arrive with the same expectations. Some want flirtation in the parlour, an hour of conversation, and a drink shared in public warmth. Some want to boast. Some want to be mothered, admired, pitied, or briefly believed. Some are dangerous and should never have been allowed through the door. Some are timid and apologise to the furniture. Others act as if money has purchased not only time, but the right to forget another person's humanity. The house learns to sort them quickly, though mistakes are costly. A sailor enters next, bringing the smell of salt, tar, damp wool and rum. He is loud but not yet cruel, singing half a line from a sea song before forgetting the rest and replacing it with a cheerful hum. A woman in blue greets him like an old customer, because he is one. Regulars matter. They can be steady income. They can bring gifts, protection, news, gossip, and sometimes genuine affection. They can also become possessive, jealous, and exhausting. The boundary between patron and problem is not always visible until it has already stepped on your foot. There are accounts from the period of soldiers and sailors being frequent visitors to regulated districts, partly because armies and navies were deeply concerned with venereal disease among men. That concern rarely translated into equal sympathy for women. Official attention often focused on inspecting and controlling women's bodies rather than questioning male behaviour. Convenient really if your goal is to preserve double standards in polished boots. The sailor presses a wrapped sweet into the hand of the woman in blue. She laughs genuinely this time and tucks it into her sleeve. Tiny gifts circulate through these rooms, ribbons, gloves, fruit, cheap jewellery, coins, notes, theatre tickets, little bottles of scent. Some are tokens of fondness, some are bargaining chips, some are bait. A curious detail from several cities is that clients sometimes brought exotic or theatrical gifts, such as imported feathers fans, or little mechanical toys to impress women who had already seen far more human absurdity than any toy could offer. Imagine trying to win admiration with a clockwork bird while wearing a waistcoat stained with gravy. Brave in its way. The newcomer listens as the clerk begins to talk. At first he speaks of the weather, which is sensible because the weather is the one topic every century agrees to suffer through together. Then he speaks of his work, his room, his mother in the country, the price of coal, and the unfairness of his employer. His voice lowers as he grows more comfortable. He's not asking questions so much as pouring himself into the silence she provides. She nods, she murmurs, she laughs once at the correct moment. She is learning that listening can be part of the bargain. The matter remains contested among historians. Were many clients seeking only physical access, or did emotional companionship play a larger role than moralists admitted? The answer again refuses to be tidy. Some men wanted power, some wanted pleasure, some wanted tenderness without responsibility, some wanted a fantasy of being admired, some wanted the ordinary kindness they did not know how to request in daylight. None of this removes the economic imbalance in the room, but it complicates the shadows. A gentleman arrives later in a dark coat with fine gloves. His boots are cleaner than the street deserves. He does not enter like the others. He pauses, allowing people to notice him. The madam notices, of course. She gives him a slightly different greeting, less brisk, more polished. Class changes the script. Wealthier clients may expect better rooms, better wine, more discretion, and women dress to match their fantasy of refinement. They may pay more, but they also bring particular risks, influence, scandal, entitlement, and the belief that their reputation is worth more than anyone else's safety. He scans the room. His gaze passes over the newcomer, rests, briefly moves on. She feels the rejection and relief together. Another woman rises to meet him, graceful in a pale dress. Her smile is calm, almost bored. You can tell she has done this for years. She knows how to let silence flatter a man more than compliments ever could. He offers his arm. They leave the parlour and the conversation resumes around the space they have vacated. At the door, a soldier argues about price. His pay is low, his pride high, and his arithmetic terrible. The madame's expression hardens. There are rules here, and one of them is payment first. A woman across the room watches closely, ready to intervene with a joke if the moment can be softened, or a warning if it cannot. Brothel safety often depends on reading tone before words sharpen. The difference between a tiresome man and a violent one may be a twitch in the jaw, a hand too tight on a glass, a refusal to laugh. The newcomer sees all of this. Her education is rapid and mostly silent. She learns which men are welcomed, which are watched, which are refused. She learns that a client may arrive carrying flowers and still be dangerous. She learns that a quiet man may be kinder than the laughing one or not. She learns that money has a smell, sometimes tobacco and leather, sometimes sweat and copper coins. The clerk asks if she will sit closer. She does by the measured inch, while the fire settles and the room hums around them. Outside, the city sends in another wave, cab wheels, boots, voices rain. The brothel door opens and closes, each time admitting not just a man, but a whole little weather system of class, mood, need, and risk. And through it all, the women watch. The door opens again, and this time the air that slips inside carries not only rain, but something sharper, more official. A coat brushed clean boots that strike the floor with measured authority, and a hat worn at exactly the angle that suggests rules follow close behind. The room feels it instantly. Conversations soften, laughter thins, and even the fire seems to quiet itself as though flames too understand the presence of scrutiny. A policeman stands just inside the threshold. He is not unfamiliar here. That is the unsettling part. He does not storm in with outrage or righteous fury. Instead, he surveys the room with the calm of someone who has seen it many times before, who knows the layout, the faces, the rhythm. The madam steps forward to greet him, her posture shifting just slightly. Not submissive, not confrontational, but careful, very careful. Law in the 19th century treated prostitution with a strange mixture of tolerance and control. In many cities, the act itself was not always illegal, yet surrounding activities often were. Running a brothel, soliciting in the street, or causing public disorder could bring fines or arrest. This created a complicated environment where enforcement depended as much on discretion as on written law. It allowed officials to intervene when they wished, and to look away when it suited them. The policeman removes his gloves slowly, one finger at a time, as if stretching out the moment. He exchanges a few quiet words with the madam. You cannot hear them clearly, but the tone is familiar. Routine, expected. There may be questions about licenses, about complaints from neighbours, about disturbances. There may also be something else, something unspoken but understood. Payments, favours, cooperation. The balance between authority and survival often rested on these quiet exchanges. A woman near the fire lowers her gaze. Another shifts her chair slightly, placing herself in better view of the madame as if proximity might offer protection. The newcomer watches all of this with wide eyes, absorbing a lesson that no one has formally explained. The house exists not only within walls, but within a network of watchfulness, permission, and risk. In some countries, especially parts of Europe, systems of regulation required women suspected of prostitution to register with authorities and undergo regular medical examinations. These policies were often justified as public health measures, particularly to protect soldiers from disease. Yet they placed the burden almost entirely on women, subjecting them to invasive procedures and official surveillance. Many reformers later criticized these systems as unjust and degrading, arguing that they ignored the role of men entirely. The policeman glances toward the staircase. All in order tonight, the madame nods, as always. He does not press further, but his presence lingers like a shadow even after he steps back toward the door. Before leaving, he casts one more look across the room as if memorizing it. Then he's gone and the door closes behind him with a soft final sound. The tension does not vanish immediately. It unwinds slowly like a tightened thread being released inch by inch. A man exhales, someone laughs again, though it sounds a little forced at first. The fiddle resumes its scraping tune, determined to pretend nothing has happened. But something has. Upstairs in a narrow room, a basin sits beside a folded cloth. A knock comes at the door, not from a client this time, but from a woman carrying a small case. Inside are instruments, bottles, and papers. A doctor or sometimes a government-appointed inspector may visit certain houses to examine the women. The purpose officially is to detect disease early and prevent its spread. The reality is far more complicated. The examinations could be intrusive, uncomfortable, and deeply resented. Women had little choice but to comply in regulated systems, and refusal could mean arrest or loss of registration. The focus remained fixed on their bodies, their health treated as a matter of public concern, while the men who visited them moved freely without similar oversight. It is a system that reveals much about the priorities of the time. The newcomer hears about these inspections in fragments whispered between the others. Some speak of them with resignation, others with quiet anger. One woman shrugs and says it is simply part of the work, like washing linens or paying for coal. Another mutters that it is an indignity no amount of money can soften. Their voices carry different truths shaped by experience. Downstairs, the madam returns to her desk. She opens the account book and makes a note, her pen scratching softly across the page. Records matter. Names, payments, visits, fines, expenses. Paper becomes a form of control, a way to track the fragile balance that keeps the house standing. If the authorities demand proof, the book may provide it, or it may be hidden, altered, or denied depending on what the moment requires. A curious detail from some historical accounts is that certain brothels kept duplicate ledgers, one for official inspection and another for true business. The official version might show modest activity, neat and respectable. The real one told a fuller story written in code or shorthand tucked away from curious eyes. It is a reminder that even in a system of surveillance, people find ways to carve out small spaces of autonomy. The evening continues, but the rhythm has shifted. The women move with a touch more caution. The clients sense it too, though they may not understand why. Authority leaves a trace like a footprint in wet earth. It does not need to remain present to be felt. The newcomer sits quietly, her earlier confidence softened. She has seen the edge of the system now, the point where the house meets the outside world, not through warmth or invitation, but through scrutiny and control. It is not a revelation that can be ignored. The clerk beside her continues to talk, unaware of the weight that has passed through the room. He speaks of his ambitions, his plans, his hope for promotion. She listens, nodding at the right moments, her smile returning like a practiced gesture. The performance resumes, but it carries a new layer of understanding. The brothel is not only a place of transactions between individuals, it is part of a larger structure shaped by law, medicine, morality, and economics. Each visit, each payment, each inspection is a thread in that structure. Some threads bind, others fray, all are connected. Upstairs, a door closes softly. Downstairs, a glass is refilled. The fire crackles steady and indifferent. Outside, the rain begins to ease, leaving the streets slick and shining under the gas lamps. And inside the house continues balancing on the narrow line between visibility and concealment, between tolerance and punishment, between survival and exposure. The rain outside has softened to a mist, but indoors another kind of dampness gathers the damp cloth by the basin. The breath on the mirror, the cool touch of fear when someone mentions illness too plainly. It is not a word people like to hold in their mouths for long. Disease moves through the house as rumour first, then worry, then sometimes fever, pain, secrecy, absence. It slips into conversations between combing hair and buttoning gloves, between pouring tea and counting coins, between one client leaving and another arriving with no idea what he may carry in with his smile. You stand near the small upstairs room where the newcomer has been told to wash, rest, and listen. The basin water is cloudy now. A cracked cake of soap sits on the washstand, soft at the edges. Beside it lies a folded rag, clean enough by the standards of the house, which is not quite the same as clean by the standards of a hospital, though hospitals of the period were not always glorious temples of hygiene either. Let us be fair. The 19th century was very busy inventing modern medicine, while also doing things that make modern eyebrows leave the room. Illness is one of the house's constant shadows. Women worry about fever, coughing, sickness, pregnancy, injury, exhaustion, infections, and the dreaded venereal diseases that 19th century doctors discussed with great seriousness and often treated with alarming confidence. Syphilis and gonorrhea were widely feared, and before effective antibiotics treatment could be long, painful, uncertain, and sometimes harmful. Mercury, for example, had been used in earlier and 19th century treatments for syphilis despite its toxic effects. The cure could become its own punishment because history does enjoy being unfair in layers. A woman in the next room sits on the edge of her bed rubbing her temples. She has missed 2 evenings below, which means missed money, which means debt tightening quietly around her like a ribbon pulled too hard. The madam has sent broth. That may be kindness or business sense or both. A sick woman cannot work, and a visibly sick woman can frighten clients, draw medical attention, or anger officials. Compassion and calculation share many rooms here, and they do not always introduce themselves properly. You hear a whisper in the corridor. Is she registered? Not yet. Then keep her out of sight. The words pass quickly, but they reveal the anxiety of regulation. In places with official medical systems, women known to the authorities might be required to attend examinations. In other places, there was no formal registration, only raids, private doctors' gossip and desperation. Either way, women had to manage health under conditions that were rarely designed for their benefit. Medical knowledge was developing rapidly in the 19th century, but access, stigma, cost and power shaped who received care and how. A small bottle sits on the mantel in one room, its label half peeled away. It promises relief in language confident enough to make you distrust it immediately. Patent medicines were everywhere in the century, sold through newspapers, shops, travelling vendors, and whispered recommendation. Some contained alcohol, opium, herbal mixtures, metals or ingredients never clearly named. They promised to purify the blood, restore feminine health, cure secret weakness, calm nerves, and solve problems no respectable person wanted printed too directly. Conveniently vague, like a politician holding a teacup. One offbeat detail from the period is that some women used coded language when discussing illness or menstruation. Speaking of bad flowers, the complaint being under the weather or other phrases that could pass in mixed company. Euphemism was not just modesty, it was protection. The wrong words overheard by a client, a policeman, or a house rival could mean lost work or trouble with authorities. Language itself became a curtain. The newcomer listens as an older woman explains the practical rules. Wash when you can, do not trust every remedy, watch the men who seem unwell, hide nothing from someone you trust, though trust is expensive, do not take powders from strangers. If a client has sores, marks, or feverish eyes, find a way to refuse or call them madam, or create a reason to leave the room. This advice is imperfect and everyone knows it. Women could not always refuse. Money fear, house pressure, and violence could override caution. Still, the advice is passed along because imperfect knowledge is better than silence. There is a medical kit on a shelf in the madam's private room. You see bandages, bottles of laudanum, carbolic acid in later decades, powders, ointments, vinegar, syringes, and folded paper packets from a chemist. Some houses relied on visiting doctors. Others avoided doctors unless absolutely necessary because doctors cost money and sometimes reported what they saw. Some women treated one another. Knowledge travelled through female networks, part experience, part superstition, part hard-won practical wisdom. A remedy might be nonsense, but it could also be the only thing available at midnight when pain made the walls feel closer. Researchers remain divided over how much official health regulation reduced disease and how much it mainly disciplined women while leaving male clients comparatively free. Supporters at the time claimed inspection protected public health. Critics argued it legitimized exploitation, punished poverty, and treated women as sources of contamination rather than human beings. You can feel that argument in the room not as a lecture, but as a lived contradiction. A doctor may bring treatment. A doctor may bring shame. A certificate may protect earnings. A certificate may mark a woman forever. The sick woman near the bed coughs again. Another woman brings hot water, moving quietly so the clients downstairs will not hear too much. She dips a cloth and lays it over the sick woman's forehead. The gesture is tender, almost sisterly. Then she glances toward the door, worried that she has been away from the parlour too long. Care has to fit between earning. Even kindness is scheduled around the knock at the door. Downstairs, the house continues to perform the health, beauty, and ease. Faces are powdered, hair is smoothed, perfume is applied. The clients see light laughter, perhaps a flush of rouge, and not the basin upstairs or the woman curled under a blanket. That separation is part of the labour. The body must appear available, cheerful and resilient, even when the actual body is tired, afraid, sore, or ill. The newcomer touches her own wrist, feeling her pulse. She is learning that the risks here are not only moral, as sermons insist, or legal, as police remind everyone, but physical in the most intimate and ordinary sense. Breath, skin, blood, sleep, hunger, cold. The body keeps the account even when the ledger does not. A doctor's carriage rattles past outside without stopping. Its wheels hiss through the wet street. Perhaps he is going to a respectable patient with a fireplace, clean sheets, and family waiting in the hall. Perhaps he has already been here earlier, leaving advice, a bottle, and a bill. In the 19th century, medicine is changing, yes, but it changes unevenly. Germ theory gains ground over time. Antiseptic practices spread slowly. Hospitals improve in some places, yet here in the hidden rooms above taverns and behind curtains, progress arrives late, diluted by poverty and judgment. The older woman takes the newcomer's hand, briefly turning it palm up, inspecting the nails as if checking for signs of weakness. "Eat when you can," she says. "Sleep when you can. And never let a man tell you he's clean because he's rich." It's the kind of sentence no university lecture improves. The house settles into deeper night. A clock strikes somewhere, its sound muffled through walls. The sick woman sleeps at last. The newcomer sits by the candle, the borrowed dress loosened at the waist, the perfume fading from her skin. Below, another client laughs. Above, the ceiling creaks. Around her, bottles, basins, rumours, warnings and remedies form the quiet medical world of the house, fragile and insufficient but stubbornly alive. And by morning, someone will wash the cloths, hide the bottles, powder the faces and make the rooms look as if fear never visited. By morning, the bottles are hidden, the cloths are rinsed and the fire is coaxed back from ash into a small stubborn glow. The house looks quieter in daylight, almost embarrassed by itself. Rooms that seemed warm and secretive under lamps now show their stains plainly. The wallpaper is more tired, the carpet has lost whatever argument it once had with beauty. A ribbon lies under a chair crushed flat. A coin has rolled near the hearth and stopped in a crack between floorboards where it will remain until someone desperate or unusually observant finds it. Money is everywhere here and somehow never anywhere for long. You stand near the madam's desk as she opens the account book. Her pen moves down the page with calm precision. Names, nicknames are sums, owed sums, earned food, laundry rent, dress, repairs, medicine, candles, gin, fines, advances. The night becomes arithmetic. All the perfume, music, fear, flirtation and fatigue are translated into columns. It is not romantic. It is not mysterious. It is bookkeeping, and bookkeeping may be the least forgiving language in the house. For many women in 19th century brothel life, earnings were unstable and heavily reduced by expenses. They might owe the house for lodging meals, clothing, cosmetics, medical treatment, alcohol, or protection. Even when a night seemed profitable, the deductions could leave very little. A woman could earn more in one evening than a factory girl made in a week, and still wake to find most of it already claimed. That is the trick, really. High income does not mean freedom if every coin arrives wearing a little leash. The newcomer watches from the doorway. She has not yet learned the exact shape of the system, but she understands enough to be wary. The dress she wore last night was not a gift. The tea was not quite a gift either. The room, the fire, the pins, the perfume, the ribbon, the laundry, all of these have a price. The house gives first, then records. It is a kindness with ink waiting behind it. The madam calls her closer and explains the account. The girl listens, her face still, while the numbers build around her. There is the cost of the dress reduced because it is second-hand, though not reduced enough to be generous. There is the room, there is food, there is powder and scent. There is a small advance, though she barely remembers agreeing to it. There is the house share from her first client, the clerk, who spoke so tenderly about promotion, and then left before dawn with his collar crooked and his conscience probably arranging excuses. The girl nods. What else can she do? Debt in such houses could become one of the strongest forms of control. It did not always require locked doors. It worked through obligation, shame, dependency, and the practical problem of having nowhere else to sleep. A woman who owed money might be told she could leave once the balance was paid, while the balance grew mysteriously each week. Food costs rose, dresses needed replacing, a doctor had to be called, a fine had been imposed, a glass had broken. Life conveniently kept adding charges. Yet the picture is not identical everywhere. Some women rented rooms independently and kept more of their earnings. Some worked in smaller informal arrangements. Some moved between houses to escape debt or seek better terms. Some had regular patrons who paid directly. Others sent money to children, parents, or siblings. The financial world of brothel life was not one single machine, but many smaller machines, some merely hard, some cruel, some surprisingly flexible until they were not. A lesser-known oddity from the records is that pawnbrokers were essential figures in this economy. Dresses, shawls, jewellery, boots, and even bedding might move in and out of pawn with the rhythm of slow nights and busy weekends. A woman could pawn a cloak on Monday, redeem it on Saturday, and pawn it again the next week, making the pawnbroker a kind of shadow landlord of fabric. The pawn ticket itself became precious, tucked into a glove or hidden in a bodice. Lose the ticket, lose the garment. And if the garment was part of your livelihood, then a scrap of paper could feel like a lifeline. The debate among social historians continues over whether brothel earnings sometimes offered women a temporary economic advantage compared with other low-paid female labour, or whether debt and stigma usually swallowed that advantage before it could become independence. You can see why the question resists a simple answer. The seamstress paid starvation wages may look at a brothel woman's coins and see possibility. The brothel woman staring at her debt may look at the seamstress and envy the ability to walk down a street without being watched. Both may be right and both may be trapped. The house wakes slowly. A maid carries ashes from a grate. Someone complains about the price of coal. Another woman sits at the table with a heel of bread counting coins into little piles. Rent, food, savings, debt, a gift for a sister. A ribbon she should not buy but might buy anyway because survival without beauty can feel like another kind of punishment. She moves one coin from savings to ribbon, then back again. The decision is absurdly small and terribly large. A woman in blue, the one who greeted the sailor, unwraps the sweet he gave her and breaks it in half. She gives one piece to the newcomer. Sugar melts on the tongue, bright and brief. The newcomer smiles before remembering to hide how much she needed that sweetness. Not all exchanges are financial. Food advice pins, jokes, warnings, and small favours circulate outside the ledger. These economies of care are harder to record, but they matter. They can keep a person steady when the account book says she has only a balance due. Still, the official money rules dominate. The madam pays the landlord unless she owns the building, which only the more successful keepers might manage. She may pay constables, suppliers, doctors, laundresses, musicians, cabmen and servants. She may extend credit to the women and charge interest directly or indirectly. She may profit handsomely, or she may spend every day juggling creditors. Brothel keeping could bring wealth, but it also brought exposure. A raid scandal, unpaid bribe, violent client or outbreak of illness could wreck the business fast. You follow the newcomer as she returns upstairs. She opens her bundle and touches the plain dress she arrived in. It smells faintly of rain and road dust. It belongs to the life before the ledger. She considers putting it on, then leaves it folded. The borrowed dress hangs from a peg, brighter, more useful, more expensive. Clothing here is not merely decoration. It is capital costume debt and bait. A torn hem can reduce earnings. A fresh ribbon can increase attention. Beauty is budgeted. Downstairs, the madam closes the account book with a soft thud. The sound travels through the floorboards. It is quieter than a door locking, but it may mean nearly the same thing. Outside morning, vendors call in the street, milk, bread, fish, newspapers. Ordinary commerce begins loud and respectable, though perhaps not as different from the house as everyone pretends. Goods are displayed, prices negotiated, credit extended, debts collected. People smile when business requires it. The city runs on transactions and then chooses which ones to condemn. The newcomer stands at the window watching daylight spread across the wet stones. She has earned money, but not yet freedom. She has shelter but not security. She has a new name, a new dress, and a first line in the ledger. Below the house prepares for another night, already spending what has not yet been earned. A coin finally slips loose from the crack near the hearth and rings faintly on the floor. Someone hears it. Someone hears the coin strike the floor, and for a brief moment the entire room seems to lean toward that small, bright sound. It is such a simple thing, a bit of metal slipping free from a crack in the boards, yet it draws attention more quickly than any polite conversation ever could. A woman near the hearth bends down, retrieves it, and turns it over between her fingers before slipping it into her pocket with a quiet, practiced motion. No one comments, no one needs to. Money has its own gravity here and everyone feels it. But what lingers longer than coins is something softer, less easily counted. You notice it in the way the woman in blue brushes crumbs from the newcomer's sleeve, not with fuss or ceremony, just a quick gesture that says you belong enough for someone to notice. You hear it in the shared laughter over a badly told joke, one that would not survive outside these walls, but somehow flourishes here in the warmth and weariness of the room. You feel it in the way voices lower when someone speaks of home, as if that word itself requires gentler handling. Life inside the house is not only transaction, it is also proximity, and proximity breeds a strange, uneven form of companionship. The women live closer than most households would tolerate. They share rooms, corridors, wash basins, clothing secrets, and silence. They hear each other's footsteps at night, recognize each other's coughs, know who sleeps lightly and who cannot wake easily. Privacy becomes a luxury, and in its absence, people learn to build small boundaries out of habit and mutual understanding. A turned back, a closed door, a glance that says not now, yet closeness also creates tension. At the table, two women argue quietly over a client from the previous night. One claims he promised to return for her, the other insists he had already made arrangements. The disagreement is not loud, but it carries a sharp edge. Clients are not just company. They are income and sometimes stability. A regular visitor can mean steady earnings, small gifts, a measure of predictability in a life that offers very little of it. Let him choose, one says, her voice tight. He did choose, the other replies equally firm. The matter might settle there, or it might not. Rivalries in such close quarters are inevitable. Competition exists alongside cooperation, and the line between the two can shift without warning. A woman may lend a ribbon one evening and refuse to share a client the next. She may offer comfort during illness, and then guard her earnings fiercely when work resumes. It is not hypocrisy, it is survival shaped by circumstance. Still, there are moments of genuine care. In one corner, a woman braids another's hair with slow, careful movements. The act is quiet, almost meditative. Fingers weave strands together, smoothing, tightening, securing. It is a gesture that requires trust. You do not place your head in someone's hands unless you believe they will be gentle. The two women speak softly, their conversation drifting between memories and small observations. A street they once knew, a dress they admired, a joke about a client who mistook a chamber pot for something far more respectable. These moments are not recorded in ledgers or police reports. They exist in the spaces between, in the pauses where the house is not performing for anyone but itself. There is evidence that many women in such environments formed bonds that resembled family, though not always in a simple or stable way. Some relationships were protective, others strained, and many shifted over time. The term sisterhood can be tempting, but it risks smoothing over the complexities. Affection and conflict often lived side by side as they do in any household, though perhaps with sharper stakes here. The newcomer begins to find her place within this shifting network. She learns who offers advice without expecting anything in return and who measures every favour. She learns which voices to trust in a moment of uncertainty and which to listen to with caution. She learns that kindness may come quietly without announcement and that it can matter more than any formal rule. At the same time, she becomes aware of the undercurrents. A woman who keeps to herself, her silence heavy with something unspoken. Another who laughs too loudly as if daring the world to challenge her. A third who watches everything with a calculating gaze, always aware of opportunity, always ready to act. Each carries her own history, her own reasons for being here, her own way of navigating the house. A small curious detail from accounts of the period is that some women developed elaborate nicknames for one another, not only for humour, but as a way of marking identity within the group. These names could be affectionate teasing or sharply ironic. A woman known as Queen might have the smallest room. One called Lady might have the roughest manners. The names created a language of their own, a way to speak about each other that belonged to the house and no one outside it. Downstairs, the day moves slowly. The house rests between nights, gathering strength for the hours ahead. Some women sleep, others mend clothing, their needles flashing in the light. A tear in a sleeve, a loose hem, a missing button. These small repairs are constant. Clothing must endure repeated wear, quick changes, and the strain of movement. A well-kept dress can last longer, earn more, and cost less in the long run. Even here, thrift has its place. The newcomer sits with the needle in her hand, learning the rhythm of mending. It is a familiar task, one that connects her to the life she left behind. The repetition steadies her. Thread through fabric, pull, not repeat. It is something she can control, at least for now. Beside her, the woman in blue hums softly a tune that drifts in and out of memory. Music fills the gaps where words might be too heavy. It carries through the room, light and unassuming, yet somehow enough. There is laughter again, this time easier. A story is told about a client who attempted to impress by quoting poetry and ended up reciting the same line 3 times, convinced it was different each time. The women laugh not cruelly, but with the relief that comes from shared absurdity. Humour becomes a kind of shelter, a way to push back against the weight of the world, if only for a moment. Still, the tensions do not disappear. Later, a disagreement flares over borrowed gloves. Voices rise then fall as the madam intervenes with a look that settles the matter without a word. Authority reasserts itself and the house returns to its uneasy balance. Harmony here is not constant. It is negotiated, maintained, sometimes lost and then rebuilt. The newcomer watches, listens, learns. She begins to understand that survival in this place depends not only on pleasing clients or managing debt, but on navigating relationships with the women around her. Trust, caution, generosity, and self-preservation all play their part. As afternoon fades toward evening, the house stirs again. Lamps are lit. Dresses are chosen. Hair is arranged. The quiet companionship of the day gives way to the performance of the night. Yet beneath the paint and perfume, beneath the laughter and the careful smiles, the connections remain fragile and real. You stand in the doorway, feeling the shift as the house prepares once more to open itself to the world. The coin has been the argument settled for now, the laughter shared. What cannot be counted lingers in the air, shaping the hours to come. And as the first knock of the evening echoes through the hall, the women take their places, carrying with them not only the weight of their work, but the threads of connection that make that work bearable. The first knock of the evening opens the house again, and with it comes the city's restless music. Not just the fiddle in the corner or the battered piano below, but the whole nighttime orchestra beyond the door. Cab wheels on wet stones, newsboys calling headlines, street vendors packing away baskets, laughter spilling from taverns, a distant theatre crowd loosening into the streets like a untying its. You step out with the women as the house breathes beyond its own walls. Not every evening remains indoors. Brothel life connects to a larger world of entertainment, music halls, theatres, pleasure gardens, dance rooms, gin palaces, oyster shops, late coffee houses, and streets where watching and being watched become part of the trade. The women move through these spaces with skill, a shawl pulled close, a hat tipped just so, a glance held long enough to invite then released before it becomes pleading. The city after dark is a marketplace of attention, and attention, like everything else, has a price. The newcomer walks beside the woman in blue who has agreed to show her the nearby streets. This is not charity exactly. It is instruction and perhaps a little kindness disguised as practicality. The woman in blue points with her eyes more than her hand. That tavern is safe enough early, not after midnight. That alley is to be avoided. That constable enjoys making examples. That cab stand is useful if you know which driver can be trusted. That music hall draws clerks on payday. That corner belongs to someone else, and you really do not want to learn local geography through hair pulling. They pass under a gas lamp. The flame flickers behind glass, casting pale light over skirts, boots, puddles, and passing faces. Public gas lighting expanded across many major cities during the 19th century, changing nightlife by making streets brighter and commercial entertainment easier to extend into evening hours. Yet brighter streets did not mean safer streets. They only made the theatre of the night more visible. People could see more, yes, but they could also be seen. A music hall door swings open, releasing warmth, tobacco smoke, and a chorus sung with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Inside benches crowd close together. Men and women sit with drinks, watching performers dance, sing comic songs, juggle, flirt with the audience, and squeeze laughter out of hardship. The room smells of beer, orange peel, wet wool, hot lamps, cheap cigars, and the faint sourness of bodies packed too closely. It is lively, vulgar, sentimental, and oddly comforting, which is quite a range for one room with sticky floors. Women from brothels sometimes found clients in such places, though the boundaries between entertainer, barmaid, casual sex worker, companion, and customer could blur. A woman might meet a man at a music hall and return with him to a house. She might sit with him for drinks while the house or tavern profited. She might simply enjoy an hour of noise where no one asked too many questions. Respectable observers often describe these places as moral traps, though one suspects some of them conducted very thorough research. The newcomer stands near the wall, trying not to stare. On the small stage, a singer in a bright dress performs a comic song about a wife, a lodger, and a missing ham. The audience roars. The joke is not elegant, but elegance is not paying for the lamps tonight. The woman in blue leans close and murmurs names of regular patrons, warning signs, useful habits. Never let a man lead you through a side door you do not know. Keep enough coin hidden for a cab or bread. Do not drink every glass bought for you. Smile at the waiter if you want information. Tip the cloakroom girl when you can. She hears everything. There is a peculiar little custom in some nightlife districts. Women and men exchange calling cards, scraps of paper, or even matchboxes marked with addresses or coded notes. A folded card could lead to a room, a tavern, a future meeting, or complete disappointment, which is still better than some forms of Victorian correspondence. These tiny paper trails remind you how much of the hidden world relied on informal networks. A house was never only a building, it was a map of contacts. The women drift from the music hall to a gin palace, where mirrors line the walls and lamps gleam on bottles like jewels. Gin palaces became prominent in 19th century Britain especially, earlier in the century offering bright interiors and affordable drink to working people. Reformers hated them naturally, which almost guaranteed they were popular. The glass and glitter promise escape. For a few coins, the city's grime can be reflected back at itself as sparkle. Here clients are easier to meet and harder to judge. Drink alters faces. It turns shyness into boldness, boredom into appetite, irritation into danger. The woman in blue keeps her back near the wall and watches the room through the mirror, a trick the newcomer immediately stores away. Mirrors do not only flatter, they warn. A man approaches. He is well dressed enough to be worth attention, not so well dressed that he expects worship. He greets the woman in blue first, then glances at the newcomer. Introductions are made lightly with invented names drifting between them like perfume. He buys drinks. The woman in blue barely touches hers. The newcomer lifts the glass, smells the sharp sweetness, and pretends to sip. This too is work. Some nights unfold through movement rather than waiting. From house to hall, from hall to tavern to street corner, from street corner to a hired cab. The city becomes an extension of the brothel, full of opportunity and risk. A woman outdoors may find better terms or choose her own client, but she also faces police attention, violence, weather, and competition. Indoors offers shelter with strings attached. Outdoors offers freedom with teeth. The question still troubles historians of urban life. Were entertainment districts mainly spaces of exploitation, or did they also allow working-class women forms of social freedom denied elsewhere? You can feel the difficulty of answering as you walk. The woman in blue is alert, strategic, and far from helpless. She knows routes, people, prices, habits. Yet her knowledge exists because danger has forced her to become expert. Skill and vulnerability are not opposites here. They walk arm in arm through the wet street. Later, the women pass a theatre after the performance ends. The crowd pours out in layers, gentlemen in dark coats, women with shawls over evening dresses, clerks imitating gentlemen, boys selling papers, cabmen calling fares, pickpockets floating through the edges like fish in murky water. The newcomer watches a respectable couple step into a carriage. The wife keeps her eyes forward. The husband's gaze lingers briefly toward the women by the lamp, then snaps away when his wife turns. Ah yes, morality, that excellent public costume. Near the curb, a flower seller offers wilted violets. The woman in blue buys one small bunch, though the purchase makes little financial sense. She pins a violet to the newcomer's dress. For luck, she says. The flower is damp and slightly bruised. Its scent is faint, almost hidden beneath smoke and rain. Still the newcomer touches it as they walk, feeling the fragile petals against her bodice. Small beauty, unnecessary beauty, stubborn beauty. The city has not priced it out of existence yet. They return toward the house through streets now shining under lamps. Music follows them in fragments. A song from the hall, a shout from a tavern, a carriage bell, a woman laughing from an upstairs window. The hidden world is not hidden tonight. It is spread across pavement mirrors, stages and doorways, moving between respectable entertainment and illicit invitation with no neat border in sight. At the brothel door, the madam opens before they knock, as if she has been listening for their steps. The woman in blue gives a brief report. Safe enough. One promising regular. No trouble. The newcomer steps inside carrying the smell of gin-damp violets and city smoke. Behind her, the street continues singing. But the song changes as you move away from the taverns and music halls and toward a quieter quarter of the city. The stones seem cleaner here, or at least more determined to look clean. Houses stand taller, their windows curtained, their knockers polished, their steps swept. The fog softens iron railings and carriage lamps. Even the horses sound more expensive, which is impressive for animals who still have absolutely no opinion about class. You walk beside the madam, now or perhaps behind her as she takes a side street where fewer people linger. The newcomer has been left inside to rest still, carrying damp violets on her dress, while the house shifts toward another sort of business. Not every establishment announces itself in noise and laughter. Some operate through discretion, and discretion in the 19th century is often just secrecy wearing better gloves. Ahead stands a townhouse with a dark green door. No bright lamp hangs outside, no woman leans at the window, no music spills into the street. If you passed it in daylight, you might think it belonged to a prosperous widow, a private club, or a family with strong opinions about curtains. Yet the carriage waiting nearby tells another story. So does the servant who opens the door after a coded knock, his face carefully blank. You step inside and the atmosphere changes at once. The hallway smells of beeswax, polished wood, coal fire, and a finer perfume than the heavy sweetness upstairs from the tavern. The carpet is thick beneath your feet. A mirror reflects lamplight from a silver stand. A vase of fresh flowers sits on a table. Not tired flowers doing their best after several difficult days, but actual fresh ones upright and smug. Somewhere deeper in the house, a piano plays a slow, polished melody. Not the brave little tavern fiddle scraping for survival. This music has had lessons. High-end brothels, often called houses of assignation, disorderly houses, or fashionable establishments, depending on the place and observer, served wealthier clients who expected privacy, comfort, and social polish. They could include drawing rooms, private dining, good wine servants, clean linens, fashionable clothing, and women trained in conversation music manners, or at least the appearance of them. The transaction remains, but it is wrapped in velvet and served with a glass. A woman descends the stairs in pale silk. Her hair is arranged with careful looseness, as if chance itself has excellent taste. She greets the madam with a kiss on the cheek and the client with a smile that lands gently, precisely, profitably. She does not rush. In this world, haste suggests need, and need lowers the price. She knows this. The difference between this house and the rooms above the tavern is not merely luxury, it is choreography. Men are not herded in through smoky doors. They arrive by appointment, recommendation, or introduction. Names may be known but rarely spoken plainly. A visitor might enter through a side passage, back gate, or private carriage entrance. Servants may be instructed never to notice. Neighbours may suspect everything and say nothing because scandal travels both ways and sometimes knocks on the wrong door. Some elite houses built entire systems around concealment. A client might be admitted through a shopfront, a rear courtyard, or a respectable-looking residence next door. In a few cities, police records and memoirs describe hidden staircases connecting rooms and discreet exits, used when a raid jealous spouse or inconvenient acquaintance appeared. Not every tale is reliable, of course. Victorian scandal writers did enjoy adding secret doors to life the way children add dragons to maps. Still, the desire for hidden movement was very real. You enter a drawing room lit by shaded lamps. The curtains are heavy. The air is warm but not usually stale. There are books on a shelf, though whether anyone reads them is another matter. A bowl of oranges glows on the sideboard. Wine glasses catch the light. A woman sits with embroidery in her lap performing domestic refinement so convincingly that you wonder whether refinement itself has always been a performance. Another turns pages of sheet music. Their dresses are expensive but not gaudy. Their manners say, "Nothing improper happens here unless it is properly paid for." Wealth changes risk by disguising it. In poorer houses, danger often arrives as violence, police raids, hunger, or unpaid debts. In elite houses, danger may arrive as scandal, blackmail, pregnancy, disease, or dependence on a powerful patron. A gentleman can ruin a woman with a rumour while protecting himself with silence. He can also promise a home, jewels, travel, even marriage, though promises made after midnight should be handled with tongs. The old question among historians takes on a different shape here. Did elite courtesans and women in luxury brothels gain meaningful social power through wealth and patronage? Or were they simply confined by more elegant forms of dependency? You can see why the answer shifts from one life to another. Some women amassed savings property, influence, even fame. Others were discarded when beauty, youth, or a patron's interest faded. A velvet sofa is softer than a wooden chair, but it is still not freedom. A gentleman arrives with a cane and a fur-lined coat. He speaks quietly to the hostess, not the madam from the tavern house, but another keeper, older and richly dressed, whose diamonds wink at her throat like tiny creditors. She has built a business on silence. Her face is pleasant, but her eyes are ledgers. She knows who owes money, who drinks too much, who is married to whom, who prefers which room, and which newspaper editor can be persuaded not to print a name. Luxury houses often depended on networks that reached into theatres, hotels, clubs, restaurants, and private parties. Actresses, dancers, kept women courtesans, and brothel residents could occupy overlapping social worlds, though their status varied widely. Some women appeared in public at promenades or opera houses, where being seen was part of the economy. A dress worn in the right box at the theatre might do more advertising than a dozen whispered cards. You pass into a dining room where supper has been laid. Cold meats, oysters, fruit cakes, wine, perhaps champagne if the house is very grand. Food here is part of seduction, but also a signal. A man who pays for supper pays for atmosphere. He pays to imagine himself refined, even while doing exactly what the poorer man did above the tavern, only with better napkins. Civilization apparently is sometimes just a sauce. There is laughter from a nearby room, soft and controlled. Not the rough laughter of the gin palace, but laughter trained to flatter. A woman tells a story about a duke's terrible French. Whether the story is true hardly matters. The client laughs because he recognizes the social world being performed for him. He is paid to remain inside his own class fantasy. The house offers not only bodies, but confirmation you are important, charming, worldly, safe from the vulgarity you secretly came to enjoy. Yet behind the scenes, the same labour continues. Servants carry coal and hot water, laundry piles up, dresses need mending. Accounts must be kept. Women compare gifts, hide letters, watch for rivals, worry about illness, negotiate with the keeper and count the years with a realism that candles cannot soften. Luxury does not abolish exhaustion, it decorates it. You glimpse a bedroom prepared for a guest. Fresh sheets, a coverlet smooth as cream, a small fire, a screen painted with birds, a bottle of scent on the table. Everything says ease, but the room is as carefully constructed as a stage set. Its purpose is to make inequality feel natural, even beautiful. That may be the most expensive illusion in the house. A little detail survives in some accounts of fashionable establishments. Women sometimes maintained albums of poems, sketches, theatre bills, pressed flowers, and calling cards from patrons. These albums were sentimental, strategic, and dangerous. A pressed flower might recall affection. A card might prove connection. A foolish note from a powerful man could become leverage, insurance, or trouble. Paper once again remembers too much. As the evening deepens, a carriage stops outside. The servant moves silently. A woman adjusts her bracelet before entering the hall. The hostess turns her head, already knowing who has arrived from the pattern of the knock. Nothing here is accidental. Even desire has an appointment time. You step back towards the entrance. The polished floor reflects lamplight like still water. Outside the fog waits. Somewhere far off, the tavern house glows with rougher warmth, its stairs creaking, its flowers wilting, its women laughing over bad poetry and borrowed gloves. Here the chairs are softer, the wine better, the risks more perfumed. The hidden world has many rooms and wealth changes. The wallpaper, not the contradictions. The green door opens briefly. A gentleman slips out, hat low, collar raised. He looks left, then right, then vanishes into the fog as if respectability itself has swallowed him whole. Inside the piano continues playing. But as you leave that polished townhouse and return toward the harsher edges of the city, the music fades into something thinner, more distant, until it becomes just another memory carried on damp air. The streets narrow again. The lamps grow fewer. The glow of wealth gives way to shadows that seem to stretch longer than they should, as if the buildings themselves are tired and leaning in for support. You walk back with the woman in blue, though she is quieter now. The contrast between the velvet rooms and these streets does not need explanation. It settles into your senses. The ground is rougher underfoot. The smells shift back toward the refuse smoke and overcrowding. Somewhere nearby, a drain gurgles with unpleasant enthusiasm. A child cries from behind a thin wall. A man coughs, deep and persistent. The city in this quarter feels closer to the bone. This is where many women lived when they were not in better houses. Lodging houses, cheap rooms, shared beds, narrow alleys where rent is low, because everything else is low too. The brothel is not always a permanent residence. Sometimes it is a workplace and home lies elsewhere in a space barely large enough to hold a mattress and a chair. Sometimes even that is too much to afford. In rapidly expanding 19th century cities, overcrowded housing became a defining feature of working class life. Families, single labourers and transient workers often packed into small, poorly ventilated rooms. Sanitation was inconsistent and disease spread easily. For women on the margins, including those involved in sex work, such conditions could make stable living arrangements difficult to maintain. A brothel might offer relative warmth and food, but it also came with its own costs and constraints. Outside, the alternatives were not always kinder. You pass a lodging house with a crooked sign. Its door is open, revealing a dim interior where a man sits behind a rough table collecting coins from those who enter. Payment is made nightly, sometimes by the bed, sometimes by the corner of a floor. Privacy is minimal. Safety is uncertain. Yet for many it is the only option. The woman in blue nods toward it. Some start there, she says. Some end there. Her voice carries no judgment, only recognition. Further down the street, a group of women stand under a weak lamp. They are not dressed for indoor work. Their clothing is thinner, their shoes worn, their movements sharper. They watch passing men with practiced intensity, stepping forward or holding back depending on the signal they read. This is street-based work, more exposed, more immediate. There is no madam here to filter clients, no walls to soften the night, no fire waiting at the end of a corridor. Only the street, the weather, and the risk. Records from the time suggest that street prostitution was often the most precarious form of the trade. Women faced higher levels of violence arrest and instability. They had more direct control over their interactions, but also fewer protections. The balance between autonomy and danger tilted heavily toward the latter. A man approaches one of the women. Words are exchanged quickly. She gestures toward a darker alley. He hesitates, then follows. The transaction is brief, negotiated in the open, yet hidden by darkness. It is a stark contrast to the drawing rooms you saw earlier, where time stretched and conversation softened the edges. Here everything is compressed. Time, space, safety all reduced to their bare minimum. A small peculiar habit noted in some urban accounts is that women working the streets would develop signals to warn each other of danger. A certain phrase, a shift in posture, a hand placed on a hip or a shawl adjusted in a particular way. These signals could pass unnoticed by outsiders, but among those who knew they carried clear meaning. It was a language of survival, quiet but urgent. You continue walking, the sounds of the city shifting again. A cart rattles past its wheels uneven. A dog barks. Somewhere a door slams. The night feels heavier here, less forgiving. The houses are closer together, their walls thin, their windows dark or broken. Light leaks through cracks, but it does not travel far. The newcomer would find this place difficult, you think. She is still adjusting to the controlled chaos of the brothel, where rules, however imperfect, provide some structure. Out here the structure dissolves. Choices must be made quickly, often under pressure. The margin for error is narrow. The woman in blue slows her pace. Yes, not for you, she says quietly, as if reading your thoughts. Not if you can help it. Her words are not dramatic. They are practical, grounded in experience. She has likely walked these streets before, perhaps more times than she cares to count. She knows the difference between the dangers inside and outside, and neither is simple. As you turn back toward the brothel, the contrast lingers. The hidden world is not one place but many layered across the city, from polished rooms with soft carpets to narrow alleys where the ground itself feels hostile. Each space carries its own rules, its own risks, its own rhythms. The question of whether these environments offered any real opportunity or simply reflected deeper inequalities remains difficult to resolve. Some women moved between them seeking better conditions or escaping worse ones. Others found themselves pushed from one to the other by circumstance, illness, or changing demand. Movement did not always mean progress. Sometimes it was just another form of survival. You pass the lodging house again. A woman stands in the doorway, now her arms wrapped around herself, watching the street with a gaze that is both alert and distant. She does not call out. She does not move. She simply watches, as if waiting for something she cannot quite name. The brothel door comes into view at last, its familiar glow a small island in the dark. Inside there will be warmth, voices, rules, and the steady presence of others. It is not safety in the fullest sense, but it is something. You step inside, leaving the street behind, though its weight follows you in. The house closes around you once more, holding its own version of the night. The house closes around you once more, holding its own version of the night, but the street has already reminded you that this world does not belong to one neighborhood, one city, or even one country. It moves with people. It follows ships, railways, armies, trade routes, and empire. It appears wherever men gather far from home, and wherever women by choice or force or hunger are pushed into the fragile economy of survival. You stand near the parlour window as fog presses against the glass. Outside, a cart rolls past loaded with crates from the docks. The smell of tar and river mud reaches even here, faint but unmistakable. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, ships sit in the harbour, their masts like black needles against the night. Those ships carry tea cotton, sugar timber soldiers, letters, diseases, stories, and people who do not always arrive freely. The 19th century is an age of movement. Steamships shorten ocean crossings, railways pull inland towns toward ports. Empires expand their reach across Asia, Africa, the Pacific, and the Americas. Migrants travel for work, soldiers are posted far from home. Sailors jump from dock to dock, and women cross borders for domestic service, factory work, marriage, entertainment, or escape. Some find opportunity, some find exploitation carefully dressed as opportunity. In port cities such as Liverpool, Marseille, New Orleans, Hong Kong, Bombay, Sydney, Buenos Aires, and San Francisco brothel districts often grew around the movement of labour and empire. Sailors came ashore with wages in their pockets and loneliness in their bones. Soldiers arrived under military discipline by day and searched for release by night. Migrants carried languages, customs, recipes, songs, and prejudices into crowded streets where money could be made quickly and lost even faster. The woman in blue tells the newcomer about a girl she once knew who came from Ireland after famine hollowed out her village. Another had been born in the Caribbean and worked in kitchens before turning to the night economy. A third spoke French and a little Spanish enough to charm a sailor or confuse a policeman, which is a useful skill, and frankly one more school should consider. Their stories differ, but the pattern is clear. Brothel life often gathers those whom the larger world has already unsettled. Race and empire shape this world sharply. In colonial cities, European officials, soldiers, merchants, and sailors often created demand for local or migrant women, while colonial authorities tried to regulate sexuality in ways that reinforced racial hierarchies. Women of colour. Indigenous women, mixed-race women, and migrant women were often treated differently by law, medicine, and public opinion. They could be hyper-visible, exoticized, punished more harshly, or pushed into segregated districts. The hidden world is not equally hidden for everyone. A difficult truth from the period is that imperial regulation frequently treated women as tools of military health or public order rather than as full human beings. In some colonial settings, authorities organised or tolerated brothels near barracks, then subjected women to medical inspection, confinement, or movement controls. The language might be administrative, almost dull on the page, but behind it was your bodies, rooms, fear, and coercion. In the parlour, the newcomer watches a sailor speak with a woman whose accent is not local. He asks where she is from. She gives a place, perhaps true, perhaps not. He says something foolish about foreign women assuming compliment and insult are cousins who enjoy travelling together. She smiles because the work requires it, but her eyes flatten for half a second. You catch it. So does the woman in blue. Exotic fantasy was part of the business in many cities. Men paid not only for company, but for stories they wanted to believe: the mysterious oriental beauty, the fiery Spanish dancer, the tragic Irish girl, the refined French courtesan, the island woman imagined through colonial desire. These fantasies were often racist, sentimental, and wildly inaccurate. They turned real people into costumes. The women might use those roles strategically when it helped them earn, but using a mask is not the same as choosing the face others force upon you. A strange little detail appears in travel writing and police notes from the century brothel districts sometimes develop multilingual slang blending. Dockside phrases. Sailors' words, thieves cant local dialects and bits of foreign languages into a practical street vocabulary. A warning, a price, a joke, a police signal, or a client description might cross 3 languages before reaching the right ear. It was messy, inventive, and probably impossible for respectable observers to understand which may have been one of its finest qualities. The conversation among researchers remains unsettled over how to interpret migration into prostitution during this period. Was it mostly trafficking and coercion, mostly economic migration, or a spectrum that shifted with age, race, class, and location? The evidence is uneven because many records were written by officials, reformers, or men who rarely understood the women's own decisions. Some women moved intentionally in search of better earnings. Others were deceived, sold, trapped by debt, or transported by networks that profited from their vulnerability. Many lived somewhere between choice and constraint, that uncomfortable middle ground where poverty makes freedom smaller. You move in thought from this room to other rooms far away. A brothel near a goldfield in Australia rough with dust and sudden money. a house by a canal in Shanghai where language status and colonial power layer the night. A district near a military post in India watched by officials concerned with soldiers' health more than women's dignity. A saloon in the American West where women serve drinks, dance, entertain, and sometimes sell sex in towns built faster than laws can settle. Different landscapes, same familiar mixture of hunger, desire, commerce, and control. Migration could also offer escape. A woman known in one city might leave for another and become someone new, at least for a while. Names were portable. Past lives could be folded away like dresses in a trunk. A train ticket might mean reinvention. A ship passage might mean danger. For women marked by scandal, illegitimacy, dismissal, or debt movement was one of the few tools available. Yet movement could also make them easier to exploit because strangers have fewer defenders. The newcomer listens as the woman with the foreign accent tells a story about arriving by ship. The sea, she says, was grey for days. Everyone was sick. A man lost his hat and behaved as if the entire empire had collapsed. The women laugh, the story is small, but it returns her to herself. Not fantasy, not category, not accent, but person with memory, humour, and a very sensible dislike of seasickness. Outside the dock, bells ring faintly. The city's hidden world stretches toward the water, toward other countries, toward the maps pinned in shipping offices and the routes drawn by empire. The brothel is local, but it's also global. Every coin carries a journey. Every accent tells of movement. Every prejudice in the room has crossed a border before arriving. The newcomer touches the violet still pinned to her dress, now drying at the edges. She begins to understand that this house is only one room in a much larger maze. Some women are trapped by the city they were born in, others by the city they came to. Some are trapped by men, others by debt, others by laws written far away. And some with luck and ferocious skill learn to move through the maze without giving up the part of themselves. No ledger can price. The parlour fire sinks lower. A sailor's song rises outside, rough, homesick, and out of tune. Inside, women from many roads sit beneath the same lamps, each carrying a private map. Inside, women from many roads sit beneath the same lamps, each carrying a private map, and beyond the window another kind of traveller moves through the night. Not a sailor, not a client, not a policeman with damp gloves and official boots, but a woman in a plain bonnet holding pamphlets under her arm. Beside her walks a clergyman with a serious face and the determined posture of a man who has never had to bargain for rent at midnight. They pause near the corner, look toward the brothel door and speak softly together. The reformers have arrived. You feel the house notice them before anyone says a word. The madam stiffens. A woman by the fire rolls her eyes with the slow majesty of someone who has endured many lectures and survived all of them. Another lowers her head. Not in shame exactly, but in weariness. Rescue when announced from outside can sound less like help and more like weather. It comes whether you invited it or not, and somehow you're expected to be grateful for getting wet. Throughout the 19th century, religious missions, charitable societies and moral reform organisations became deeply involved in campaigns against prostitution. In Britain, the United States and many other places, reformers opened refuges, penitentiaries, rescue homes, and training institutions meant to remove women from the sex trade and prepare them for domestic service, factory work, laundry sewing, or marriage. Some offered real shelter from violence and hunger. Others offered discipline with a hymn book on top. The woman in the bonnet knocks. The room holds still. The madam opens the door only wide enough to make her answer clear. The reformer smiles with practiced gentleness. She asks whether any woman inside wishes to leave tonight. She speaks of repentance, rest, honest work, a bed, soup, prayer, a fresh beginning. Her voice is kind or trying very hard to be. The madam does not move. Behind her the newcomer listens from the stairs. The words fresh beginning reach her like a draft under a door. They sound tempting. They also sound suspiciously tidy. Rescue homes varied widely. Some were run by women who genuinely understood poverty and tried to offer safety. Others imposed strict rules that treated the women as fallen children rather than adults. Residents might rise early, attend prayers, sew, scrub, wash laundry, and follow schedules of silence and obedience. Leaving could be discouraged. Letters might be monitored. The aim was moral transformation, but also social control. A woman could exchange one set of restrictions for another, with cleaner sheets and more sermons. The reformer continues speaking. She says the house is no place for a soul. The woman by the fire murmurs that souls do enjoy being warm, actually. No one laughs loudly, but several mouths twitch. Gentle sarcasm is a survival blanket, and this room has several layers. To be fair, reformers were not all hypocrites or meddlers. Some fought legal systems that punished women while ignoring men. Some campaigned against compulsory medical inspection. Some exposed trafficking, child exploitation, and police corruption. Josephine Butler, for example, became a leading British campaigner against the Contagious Diseases Acts, arguing that the laws violated women's rights and dignity while shielding male clients from responsibility. Her work helped bring public attention to state regulation and its injustices, yet even sympathetic reform carried assumptions. Many reformers imagined prostitution as a fall from innocence, a moral collapse, or a stain to be washed away. Women's own explanations, low wages, dismissal, pregnancy, hunger, migration debt, violence, were sometimes heard and sometimes folded into a simpler story of sin and rescue. The story made donors feel useful. It did not always make the women feel understood. A little unusual detail from some rescue institutions is that they kept before and after records in moral language, noting former habits progress in obedience, skill at laundry, willingness to pray, and suitability for service. A woman's worth could be rewritten through neat handwriting in an institutional book. Haircut, plain dress, issued old name, discouraged new behaviour praised. It sounds almost peaceful until you remember that identity is not laundry. It cannot simply be scrubbed and hung to dry. The newcomer asks the woman in blue whether anyone ever goes with the reformers. Sometimes the woman in blue says, "And do they stay?" Sometimes. That is the whole answer and maybe the truest one. Some women use rescue homes strategically. A bed for the winter. A place to recover from illness. A pause after violence. A way to escape a controlling madam or dangerous man. Others found the rules unbearable and returned to the streets or houses. Some did leave prostitution permanently, though the work available afterward was often poorly paid and socially narrow. Domestic service might offer respectability, but also long hours, low wages, vulnerability to employers, and dismissal for the smallest suspected scandal. Respectability, as usual, came with a bill attached. The question is still difficult for modern scholars. Did rescue institutions primarily offer compassion, or did they reinforce the same gendered control that made women vulnerable in the first place? The answer changes by institution, by staff, by city, and by the woman seeking help. In one building, a matron might protect a frightened girl from a violent man. In another, she might shame an adult woman into silence. Charity can be a lamp. It can also be a cage with lace curtains. The reformer leaves a pamphlet on the step when the madame refuses her entry. The door closes. For a moment, no one picks it up. Then one of the women does. She opens it and reads the title aloud in a solemn voice that makes everyone laugh. The pamphlet speaks of ruin, purity, redemption, and the wages of sin. It does not mention the price of coal. This omission feels important. Later, when the room quiets, the newcomer finds the pamphlet folded beside the mantel. She reads slowly. The words are both comforting and cruel. They tell her she can be remade. They also tell her she is broken. She thinks of the rescue home bed, the soup, the prayers, the rules. She thinks of the ledger downstairs, the borrowed dress, the woman in blue's hand on her shoulder, the violets drying at her bodice. She is not sure which door leads out or whether any door does. Outside, church bells ring the late hour. Their sound drifts over taverns, lodging houses, police stations, theatres, and brothel roofs alike. The bells do not choose who hears them. They fall on everyone soft and silver, as if the city could be gathered into one calm note. The madam sits at her desk turning a page in the account book. The woman in blue trims a lamp. The newcomer folds the pamphlet carefully and tucks it into her bundle. Not because she believes all of it, and not because she rejects all of it, but because in this world even a troublesome scrap of paper might someday become useful. The night resumes. A client knocks, a woman laughs. Somewhere nearby, the reformers walk on to the next door carrying soup sermons, pity, courage, blindness, and hope in uneven measure. And inside the house, salvation remains a complicated word. And inside the house, salvation remains a complicated word, one that sits uneasily beside other words that matter more in the moment, safety, coin, sleep, and tomorrow. The lamps burn lower now, and the night has settled into that quieter stretch where laughter softens and shadows lengthen along the walls. It is during these hours that the house becomes most alert. Not all danger arrives loudly. You notice it first in the way the woman in blue shifts her position near the door, not drawing attention, just adjusting her view of the room. The madam seated at her desk pauses her writing for half a second longer than usual before continuing. These are small signals, but in a place like this, small signals are everything. A man has entered who does not belong comfortably to the rhythm of the house. He is well dressed, but something in his manner feels off. His smile lingers too long, his eyes move too quickly. He speaks with confidence, yet his voice carries a tension that does not match the ease he tries to project. The women notice. They always notice. Experience has trained them to read not only what a man says, but how he stands, how he breathes, how he holds a glass. The madam approaches him with measured calm. Good evening, she says. He returns the greeting, his tone smooth, but there is a sharpness beneath it, like a knife wrapped in cloth. He asks for a particular woman, one who is not present. The madam explains this gently. He insists. The conversation tightens. This is where the unseen networks of protection begin to show themselves. In many brothels, especially those that had survived long enough to learn caution arrangements were made to handle trouble. Sometimes this meant a doorman or a servant positioned near the entrance. Sometimes it meant an understanding with local men who could be called upon if a situation turned violent. In certain districts, informal agreements existed between establishments, a kind of mutual awareness where news of a dangerous client could travel quickly. The man's voice rises slightly. Not enough to cause a scene, but enough to test the room. The woman in blue steps closer, her posture relaxed but ready. Another woman moves toward the stairs, not to flee, but to ensure someone is positioned above if needed. The house rearranges itself without a word. The madam's tone changes just a fraction. You'll have to choose another or come back another evening. The man hesitates. His eyes flick across the room, measuring, calculating. For a moment it seems he might push further. Then something in the air, perhaps the quiet redness of the women, perhaps the knowledge that he's outnumbered, perhaps simple instinct, tells him to step back. He laughs too loudly and accepts a drink instead. The tension does not vanish, but it loosens. You realize that protection here is rarely absolute. It is negotiated, improvised, and often fragile. Women rely on one another, on the madam, on servants, on the structure of the house, and sometimes on outside figures who operate in the shadows of legality. These might include watchmen hired muscle, or men who consider themselves guardians in exchange for payment or loyalty. There are also darker figures in this network. Blackmailers move through the edges of this world, collecting secrets like coins. A man seen entering a brothel may have a reputation to protect a marriage, to maintain a position to defend. A letter, a witness, or a rumour can become a weapon. Some brothels used this knowledge as leverage, quietly ensuring payment or compliance. Others became victims of it, caught in schemes that could unravel everything. Cases from the period describe elaborate blackmail operations where individuals posed as clients only to later threaten exposure. The details vary, but the pattern is clear. Secrecy creates opportunity, and not always for those inside the house. The newcomer listens as the women speak of such dangers in low voices. Never trust a man who asks too many questions, one says, or one who asks none at all, another adds. They share stories not for entertainment but as warnings. A man who refused is to see unsum and violent. Another who claimed to be a policeman to gain entry. One who returned again and again, growing more possessive each time. until he had to be barred entirely. These stories form a kind of oral map guiding behaviour-shaping decisions. The discussion touches on the presence of informers. In some cities, individuals were paid to report illegal activities to authorities. These informers could be anyone: a disgruntled neighbour, a rival, a former employee, even a client. Their information could lead to raids, fines, or closures. The threat of being reported added another layer of uncertainty to an already precarious existence. The madam keeps a careful eye on this. She knows which neighbours are likely to complain, which officials are strict, which can be persuaded to look the other way. Her role is not only to manage the house, but to navigate this web of relationships, balancing risk and reward with each decision. A small curious practice noted in some accounts is the use of coded language or signals to indicate trouble. A phrase spoken in the parlour, a knock in a particular rhythm, a lamp extinguished at the wrong moment. These signals allowed the house to respond quickly without alarming clients. It was a quiet system, but an effective one. The man at the table finishes his drink and stands. For a moment you think he might cause trouble after all, but he places a coin on the table, nods to the madam and leaves. The door closes behind him and the room exhales. The woman in the blue returns to her seat, her expression easing. "Not tonight," she says. The newcomer nods, understanding more now than she did an hour ago. Safety here is never guaranteed. It is built from awareness, cooperation, and a constant readiness to act. It depends on the strength of the house, the judgment of the madam, and the instincts of the women themselves. As the night continues, the house settles back into its rhythm. Laughter returns, quieter now, edged with the knowledge of what might have been. The fire burns steadily. The lamps flicker. Outside, the city moves on, unaware or uninterested in the small dramas that unfold behind closed doors. You stand in the corner, watching as the women carry on their movements, smooth their expressions, composed. They have learned to live with uncertainty, to navigate danger with skill and resilience. And as another knock sounds at the door, the house prepares once more to meet whatever the night brings. And as another knock sounds at the door, the house prepares once more to meet whatever the night brings. Yet not everything important enters from the street. Some things are already inside, tucked into drawers, folded into sleeves, pressed between pages, hidden beneath loose floorboards, or held carefully in the memory where no constable can seize them. The night may belong to clients, money, danger, and performance, but the quiet hours belong to smaller things. You find them in the newcomer's room after the house has begun to settle. A candle burns low on the washstand. Her borrowed dress hangs from a peg, its bright fabric now limp with use. On the chair lies her small bundle, opened and rearranged. She kneels beside it, taking out the plain dress she wore when she first arrived, the folded pamphlet from the Reformer, the dried violet from the woman in blue, and a small book with a worn cover. She turns the book in her hands. It may be a prayer book, a sentimental novel, a school text, or a blank notebook, depending on the life she carried with her. Whatever it is, it has weight beyond paper. It says, before this room, before this name, before the ledger, there was another version of me. Personal keepsakes appear again and again in traces of 19th century women's lives: letters, lockets, ribbons, photographs, pressed flowers, prayer cards, pawn tickets, small books, combs, gloves, and bits of jewellery. For women in brothels, such objects could hold memory, identity, bargaining power, or hope. They were portable roots. When a life could be disrupted quickly, what could fit in a bundle mattered enormously. The newcomer opens the book and removes a folded letter. Its creases are soft from being handled often. The handwriting is uneven, perhaps from a younger sibling or a mother who learned letters late. She reads it slowly, lips moving soundlessly. Outside the room, floorboards creak. Downstairs, someone laughs in her sleep or maybe sobs. The sounds are sometimes cousins. The letter pulls her away from the house without moving her body at all. Letters could be dangerous things. They connected women to families who might not know where they were, or who knew and chose silence, or who depended on money sent home and asked no questions because hunger is skilled at discouraging curiosity. Some women wrote under false names, some gave vague addresses, some never wrote at all. Others kept letters they could not answer because answering would reveal too much, or because shame, anger, grief, and pride had tied their tongues. A lesser-known detail from police and court materials is that personal letters sometimes became evidence either in disputes, blackmail cases, inheritance, arguments, or attempts to identify a woman after death or arrest. A love note could become an exhibit. A family letter could become a clue. The intimate could be dragged into the official, which is one of history's colder habits. The newcomer folds the letter again and places it near the dried violet. You remember that flower from the street pinned for luck? It is now small and brittle at the edges, and yet she keeps it. Perhaps because it was given freely. Perhaps because free things are rare enough to deserve preservation. Perhaps because the woman in blue has become in only a few days something like a guide, though. Guide is too formal. A word for someone who also steals your hairpins and saves you from bad clients. Across the hall, another woman keeps a painted miniature in a tin box. It shows a child round-cheeked and solemn, dressed in white. The woman does not show it to clients. She shows it only after trust, and even then only briefly. Is the child hers, a niece? A memory borrowed from someone else you do not know? The object allows her to carry tenderness without explaining it. Explanation can be costly. A few rooms down, the woman with the foreign accent has a string of beads wrapped in cloth. She touches them before sleep. Whether they are religious, familial, decorative, or simply familiar, they anchor her. She once joked that they are worth nothing, which is usually what people say when something is worth too much to sell. In a world where shawls, rings, and dresses can vanish into porn, the decision not to sell an object becomes a declaration quiet but firm. Those who study women's private writings from this period often wrestle with the problem of silence. Many brothel residents left no diaries, no memoirs, no full account in their own voice. Their lives appear in police registers, hospital files, reform reports, court testimony, and newspapers written by others. Keepsakes, when they appear, offer glimpses of inner worlds that official records flatten. Are they evidence of longing resistance, ordinary sentiment, or simply the universal human habit of saving bits of the past? Probably all of that, depending on the hand that held them. The newcomer hears a soft knock. The woman in blue enters without waiting for much of an answer, because privacy in this house is more of a polite suggestion than a settled law. She carries 2 cups of weak tea. Steam rises faintly. Couldn't sleep, she asks. The newcomer shakes her head. The woman in blue sits on the bed and notices the letter but does not ask. That restraint is a kindness. Instead, she reaches into her own pocket and draws out a small scrap of ribbon, faded gold, folded carefully. From my sister's wedding, she says after a while. There is a long pause. The house murmurs around them. Does she know where you are? The woman in blue smiles without humour. She knows where the money comes from when she needs boots for the children. That is knowing enough. The words settle softly, not bitter exactly, but worn smooth by repetition. Many women supported families, children, parents, or lovers. Money sent home might be accepted with gratitude and silence. Respectable households sometimes survived on coins no one wished to name. Morality can be surprisingly flexible when the rent is due, though it prefers to do its stretching behind closed curtains. They sit together in the candlelight. The newcomer shows the dried violet. The woman in blue laughs and says it looks dreadful now, which it does. Then she adds more softly, keep it anyway. The room grows warmer with their quiet. Not safe, not entirely, but gentler. You realise that private dreams survive here in small forms because large plans are difficult. One woman dreams of saving enough to open a laundry, another of travelling west or south or across the sea. Another imagines a house with a garden, though she admits she would probably kill every plant by accident. Another wants only to sleep for 3 days without being called. Dreams do not have to be grand to be sacred. Sometimes a dream is a clean bed. Sometimes it is a child in school. Sometimes it's a name no one here knows. The candle sinks lower. The newcomer tucks the letter pamphlet, violet, and book back into the bundle. It is not much, but it is hers. In a house where dresses may be borrowed names, invented rooms, rented and time-sold, possession itself becomes meaningful. The bundle holds proof that she is more than the role she performs downstairs. Outside the city quiets towards dawn. In the room, two women drink weak tea and guard their small treasures. Outside the city quiets towards dawn, and inside the house the night begins to thin like smoke that no longer has the strength to hold its shape. Lamps burn low, voices fade, doors close one by one. What remains is a softer kind of noise, the settling of boards, the shifting of blankets, the slow breathing of those who have finally found sleep. You feel the weight of time here in a different way. The newcomer lies awake a little longer, her bundle tucked close, her mind turning over everything she has seen. But around her others are already further along a path she has only just stepped onto. You begin to notice them more clearly now, the women who carry years in the way they move, in the pauses between their words, in the careful economy of their energy. There is a woman downstairs who no longer sits by the fire to attract attention. She keeps to the edges, taking fewer clients, choosing them more carefully when she can. Her dresses are well kept, but no longer the brightest in the room. She watches more than she pukes. Once perhaps she was the centre of attention. Now she is something else, not invisible but shifting toward it. Age in this world does not follow a gentle curve. It can arrive quickly, shaped by a hard-living illness, exhaustion, and the constant demand to appear younger than you feel. Many women entered brothel life in their late teens or early 20s. By their 30s, some found it harder to compete with newer arrivals. This did not mean the end, but it meant change, and not always a welcome one. Some transitioned into different roles within the house. A woman might become a kind of assistant to the madam, helping manage the younger ones, keeping accounts, watching the door, or maintaining order in the parlour. Others found work as laundresses, cooks, or servants. A few with enough savings and luck opened small establishments of their own. These paths were not guaranteed, but they existed. The woman in blue speaks of this quietly one afternoon while mending a tear in her sleeve. "You don't stay the same here," she says. No one does. The newcomer listens, her fingers stilling on the fabric she is sewing. What happens then? The woman in blue shrugs, not carelessly, but with the acceptance of someone who has asked the question many times. "You find a way," she says, "or the world finds one for you." There are records of women leaving prostitution through marriage, though such marriages were often complicated by secrecy and social stigma. A husband might know and accept the past, or he might not. A woman might conceal it, hoping to build a new life on silence. Sometimes the truth surfaced later with consequences that could be harsh and unforgiving. Others left for domestic service, returning to a form of labour that offered respectability but little independence. The hours were long, the pay modest, and the position vulnerable. A single accusation could mean dismissal. Yet for some it was a way out, a chance to step beyond the label that had defined them. There were also those who moved from one city to another seeking anonymity. A new place meant new faces, fewer questions, and the possibility, however fragile, of beginning again. Migration, which had brought many into this world, could also carry them away from it. Still, not all exits were chosen. Illness could force a woman out of work before she was ready. Without savings, without support, she might find herself back in the lodging houses you saw earlier, or worse. The line between working and not working could be thin, and once crossed, difficult to recross. Prisons and workhouses also appear in the records, particularly for women arrested repeatedly for solicitation or related offences. These institutions were harsh, focused on discipline and labour rather than comfort. For some they became a cycle, a place entered and left multiple times, each visit eroding a little more of what remained. A small revealing detail from historical accounts is that some women kept track of their age, not by years but by seasons or events. 3 winters in the house, one might say, or since the last fever. Time was measured in survival, not birthdays. The newcomer begins to understand that the future here is not a single path but a series of uncertain turns. Each choice, each circumstance, each moment of luck or misfortune can shift the direction. There is no clear map, only stories passed from one woman to another, fragments of experience that offer guidance but no guarantees. The woman downstairs, the one who sits at the edge, rises slowly and moves toward the kitchen. Her steps are careful, conserving energy. She has learned how to move through the house without drawing attention, how to remain part of it without being its focus. There is a quiet dignity in that, though it is not the kind that earns applause. The newcomer watches her, seeing not only who she is, but who she might become. The thought is unsettling, but also clarifying. It sharpens the sense of time, of urgency, of the need to decide to plan to hold on to something that might lead elsewhere. The house itself seems to acknowledge this passage. It does not promise permanence. It offers shelter, work, connection, but always with the understanding that nothing here is fixed. Women arrive, women leave. Some return, some disappear into other lives, other cities, other stories. As the day begins to lighten the edges of the windows, the house settles into a brief, fragile calm. Sleep comes for those who can take it. Others remain awake, thinking, remembering, planning. The newcomer finally closes her eyes, her thoughts drifting between the present and the uncertain future. The bundle rests beside her, holding the small pieces of a life that continues to shift. And in the quiet, you sense the passage of time, not as a steady line, but as a series of moments, each one carrying the possibility of change for better or worse, for now or later. The house breathes and the night gives way to morning. The house breathes and the night gives way to morning. But the world outside does not let the story rest quietly. It carries the house into print, into rumour, into scandal, into columns of ink that travel far beyond these narrow streets. What happens here does not stay here, not entirely. It leaks into newspapers, pamphlets, court records, whispered conversations at breakfast tables, and speeches delivered with great seriousness by men who have never climbed these stairs. You find a newspaper folded on the table downstairs, its edges smudged with ink and damp fingers. Someone has left it open to a column marked with a bold heading. The words are large, urgent, and just a little too eager. Shocking discovery in the city's underbelly. The tone is familiar even before you read further. It promises outrage. It promises revelation. It promises to expose something that everyone already knows exists but prefers to encounter through the safe distance of print. The article describes a recent raid on a brothel in another part of the city. It speaks of fallen women, immorality, and vice, weaving a story that is equal parts fact, exaggeration, and moral performance. Names are hinted at but not fully given. Details are stretched, polished, and arranged to produce the maximum effect. The reader is invited to feel both shocked and fascinated to come and to linger. The newspapers in the 19th century often played a significant role in shaping public perceptions of prostitution. Reports of brothel raids, court cases, and scandals were common, and they frequently blended genuine concern with sensationalism. Editors knew that such stories attracted attention. They also knew how to frame them in ways that reinforced prevailing moral attitudes. The women gather around the table, some reading, others listening, as the article is read aloud with a mixture of amusement and irritation. They make it sound like a circus, one says. Worse, another replies, at least a circus admits what it is. The newcomer listens closely. This is her world being described, but not by her, not by anyone who truly understands of it. The gap between experience and representation becomes clear. The article speaks of danger, but not of the daily routines. It speaks of sin, but not of survival. It speaks of women as objects, not as individuals with histories, choices, and constraints. A particularly striking aspect of these reports is how they often focused on the women while leaving the men in shadow. Clients might be mentioned vaguely if at all their identities protected or deemed less relevant. This imbalance reflected broader social attitudes where responsibility was unevenly assigned and rarely questioned. A curious detail from some newspaper archives is the use of coded language or euphemisms to describe brothel locations and activities. Phrases like a house of ill repute, a disorderly establishment, or a certain address allowed readers to understand the meaning without requiring explicit description. It was a form of polite concealment that mirrored the broader social tendency to acknowledge and deny at the same time. The conversation among historians remains active when it comes to interpreting these sources. Some view newspapers as valuable records of public attitudes and events, while others caution that they must be read critically with attention to bias, exaggeration, and the commercial motives behind sensational reporting. The truth often lies somewhere between the lines in what is said and what is left unsaid. The woman in blue folds the newspaper and sets it aside. "They don't know us," she says simply. Her words carry weight. They are not defensive, but firm. The house exists beyond the page, beyond the headlines, beyond the simplified narratives that reduce complex lives to a few dramatic sentences. Later you hear another story not from a newspaper, but from a woman who has been here longer than most. She speaks of a scandal involving a prominent man, a politician perhaps, who was discovered to have frequented a well-known house. The story spread quickly, whispered in drawing rooms and printed in cautious language in the press. The man denied everything. The women involved were not given the same opportunity. Scandals like this were not uncommon. They revealed the contradictions at the heart of society's relationship with prostitution. Publicly condemned, privately consumed, denied in speeches, acknowledged in practice. The exposure of a respected figure could cause temporary outrage, but it rarely led to lasting change. The system adjusted, absorbed the shock, and continued. The newcomer begins to understand that her life is not only shaped by what happens within the house, but also by how the outside world chooses to see it. Reputation, rumour, and narrative all play a role. They influence how women are treated, what opportunities are available, and how they are remembered. A small intriguing practice noted in some accounts is that certain brothels kept their own informal records of notable clients not for publication but as a form of protection or leverage. These records might include names, habits, preferences, and connections. They were not meant to be shared widely, but they existed as a quiet counterbalance to the power held by those who visited. As the day progresses, the house returns to its routine. The newspaper is forgotten for a while, replaced by the immediate concerns of work rest and preparation for the next evening. Yet the stories it carries linger in the background, shaping perceptions, influencing behaviour, and reminding everyone that their lives are part of a larger narrative, one they do not fully control. You stand by the window watching the street as it fills with a daytime activity. Vendors call out their goods. Children run past their laughter sharp and bright. A carriage rolls by its occupants hidden behind drawn curtains. The city moves on as it always does, carrying with it the echoes of the night. Inside, the women continue their work, their lives unfolding in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. They are not the caricatures of the newspaper, nor the symbols of moral debate. They are individuals, each with her own story, her own path, her own way of navigating the world. And as you turn away from the window, you realize that the hidden world is not only hidden by walls and curtains, but by the stories told about it, stories that reveal as much about the teller as they do about the subject. The house prepares once more for evening. Its rhythms, steady, its complexities intact, its reality far richer than any headline could capture. The house prepares once more for evening, but this time you do not follow the lamps deeper into the night. You remain near the window as the sky pales, watching the city turn from secrecy to routine. Dawn comes gently at first, a grey softening above rooftops, then a thin wash of light over wet stones, shuttered shops and doorsteps, scrubbed by women who have been awake longer than anyone praises. The brothel looks different in morning. The fire is low, the glasses are clouded. The velvet where there is velvet looks less grand. The borrowed dresses hang limp from pegs. Powder dusts the washstand. Somewhere a woman sleeps with one hand still curled around a ribbon, as if holding onto a small piece of herself. You have walked through rooms above taverns, polished townhouses, lodging houses, music halls, alleys, reform shelters, and newspaper scandals. You have seen how this hidden world was never truly separate from ordinary society. It was tied to wages, migration, gender rules, illness or empire, loneliness and money. It was condemned in public and sustained in private, which is one of the 19th century's less charming party tricks. By the late 1800s, campaigns against regulation urban reform movements Changing policing and shifting medical knowledge began reshaping how prostitution was discussed and controlled in many places. Yet the women themselves remained too often spoken about rather than listened to. Their lives were preserved in fragments, court files, hospital notes, letters, pamphlets, ledgers, and the occasional memory that slipped past judgment. One odd little trace remains in old city records houses once notorious could become respectable shops' offices, or family homes within a generation. A parlour that heard whispered bargains might later sell gloves or tea. The city covers its past quickly like fresh wallpaper over smoke stains. Researchers continue to ask how much we can truly recover from records written mostly by outsiders. Was this world mainly coercion, survival, labour, community exploitation, performance, or all of these at once? The honest answer is yes, unevenly, painfully, humanly yes. The newcomer stands at the doorway, now older in understanding than when she arrived. The woman in blue adjusts her shawl, the madam closes the ledger. Outside carts begin moving, bells ring, bread is delivered, and respectable morning returns with a clean face and a short memory. You step back into the street. The gas lamps are being extinguished one by one. Their smoky little halos fade into daylight. Behind you the house grows quiet, not innocent, not monstrous, simply real. And now the city softens around you. The stones under your feet cool. The fog lifts from the river in pale ribbons. Somewhere a horse shakes its mane, a milk cart rattles by, and the first birds begin their small, brave arguments in the eaves. You do not need to solve every contradiction tonight. You have only visited quietly, carefully, carrying attention where judgment once stood too loudly. Let the lamps fade now. Let the ledgers close. Let the women sleep behind their curtains, not as symbols, not as warnings, not as headlines, but as tired human beings in a difficult century resting at last in the thin blue hush before day. You breathe in the morning air. It is damp, smoky, ordinary, and strangely gentle. The door behind you is closed. The street ahead is emptying of shadows. Step by step you leave the gaslight behind and the city becomes softer, quieter, smaller. And as your own room returns around you warm and dark and safe, let the old streets drift away. Let the carriage wheels fade. Let the rain become only a whisper. Let history settle like a blanket, heavy enough to comfort, light enough to dream beneath. Sweet dreams.